baby gorillas, and how the devil are we all? Happy Saturday. I thought I would get you something cheery to look at on Saturday. Hope it's all come through. Let me know if this connection freezes again. It's absolutely terrible for freezing all the time and not showing my beautiful face on screen. So let's have a wee look at this. So this is a nice gentleman, Apostate Aladdin. I think the gentleman is from the Middle East. People are talking about the fact that he's got an American accent. Tons of people, Arabic people have got American accents. There was a lot of schooling done over there by British and American schools and things like that. So, and obviously the worldwide influence of the American culture and British culture is, and there is a good relationship between Arabic people and British people as well. It's, there isn't animosity there, although the issue is not about them on a personal level. As Winston Churchill says, there's some absolutely fantastic individuals in the Middle East, and I found that as well. I've got nothing but good things to say about the people who I met in the Middle East, who are Middle Eastern. Great bunch. No animosity on a personal basis there whatsoever. However, the problem isn't them as individuals, which, as I said, I had a great time down there, really nice people. The issue is Islam, and this gentleman is an ex-Muslim, that's why he's an apostate, and he did a very interesting interview with a lady who was, I think, went into Islam. I think she married into Islam and now she's coming out. So I'd let you go and look at that on the Apostate Aladdin presentation. So let's have a wee listen to him. But this is about Yasir Qadhi, who he came out with the great quote that there's holes in the Islamic narrative. Now, the Quran is meant to be perfectly preserved. There's not meant to be any deviations from it. However, there are multiple different translations that mean different things in Arabic that don't mean the same thing. 27, I think, or 28 books of the Quran that are all different. And this is meant to be preserved as the word of God, or Allah, as the case may be. But we'll have a wee listen to this gentleman. So he's basically now talking about what happened in Pakistan, and I'll come on to the Yasir Qadhi videos in a minute, and this is where Islam is a political ideology as well as a religion, and we're going to be talking about anarcho-Islam versus state-sanctioned Islam, and the murder that's acceptable in both, and why one way of murdering somebody is better than another way of murdering somebody for not believing in the child rapist death cult. So let's have a wee look at this.
I didn't think that I was going to have to react to it or anything when I first watched it. I actually...
And this guy's a nice fella. I really like him. He comes across like a really nice guy. I don't know if he's gay. I don't want to make assertions of him, and that's why he's left Islam. But it doesn't really matter if he is or not. Nothing wrong with being gay as well.
I was curious about what Yasir Qadhi has to say. So for context, I will include some links in the comments, but, under the video. The context is, unfortunately, a bit under 2 weeks ago. I can't even remember the day exactly. A Sri Lankan man was hunted down by a mob of angry believers because allegedly he took down a poster with the Prophet's name on it.
Now, apparently, this guy was Sri Lankan and didn't know what the poster actually said. But there was meant to be no posters or anything on the walls in the factory or wherever it was.
Well, the article that I read said that there were renovations in the workplace or something. And keep in mind, this was a poster at a factory, I believe. And allegedly he took it down and people got mad. And the total number of people in that mob was about 400 or some crazy number like that. And unfortunately, they killed the man and then they desecrated his body. And it's made international headlines lately. And it wasn't something that I was like happy about hearing. People sometimes presume that, or Muslims sometimes presume that when us ex-Muslims or critics of Islam or whoever comes across something like this, we rejoice somehow. I absolutely don't. If anything,
Yeah, well, I'm sure if you've got family, probably they care more about you than they do about you. You care more about them than they do potentially about you. I don't know what's happening to the chat. Obviously, it looks like it's obviously looks like something is happening here. I'm getting very low exposure just now. And that there seems to be always be problems. There doesn't seem to be any chat, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. But Windows unable to save all data to file, blah blah blah. All right, okay. Not sure what's happening here, but there always seems to be an issue. So I'm not quite sure if this is going to back up. But anyway, let's continue. If anybody can say anything in the chat, let us know. If you can't say anything in the chat, hello. Let's see if we can get it up. Hello. Then let me know in comments underneath, because I think we're getting mucked about here. Carry on, sir. Sorry for interrupting.
it makes me even more depressed about this whole situation. I mean, as a Muslim, every time I heard about something or the other happening, I would pray, in the depths of my heart that it's not a Muslim who did it. And I kind of still do, even though I don't pray. I just hope to myself, I hope it's not a Muslim who did it, because it doesn't benefit me in any way. It harms me. It harms anyone who looks like me. And if you haven't noticed, I look Muslim, as Muslim as any other Muslim. And I have a Muslim name. So it's not like this discrimination that, happens as backlash isn't going to hurt me.
As I said, many people, there's different degrees of religiosity in the Middle East as well. So it should be said that not everybody's a raging Islamist, and people are taught Islam in different ways, so they can be taught the good parts of the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah, and they will cleverly ignore other parts except for the radicals.
Not that I want to see people, suffer the backlash because of these attacks. I really don't like this happening. So I wanted to know what Yasir Qadhi would have to say about this.
Now, I don't know how well thought of Yasir Qadhi is. I know Muhammad Hijab and some of these guys who want to kill apostates at a state level. The apostate prophet did a wee video about that. We're proud of that. I wonder if we can get that. Let's have a wee look at that. This is it. So apostates must die. So like that gentleman, he's an apostate Aladdin, and then we've got the apostate prophet. He's another nice guy, and then we've got this nutter who's in the UK who wants to slaughter apostates. I'm sure homosexuals and atheists and everybody else, adulterous wives that get stoned to death.
Back in 2002, 2003, 2004,
So obviously Dave Wood.
I was studying Islam for one reason and one reason only. My best friend was a Muslim.
And I should point out that I didn't know anything about Islam. I thought Islam was probably similar to the Bible, and it was similar. And that was my overview. I didn't have any sort of in-depth knowledge of Islamic history and how it interacted with the West and the conquest and the moves that Islam did into the West.
After he became a Christian, I thought I was done with Islam. I'd only been studying Islam because my best friend was a Muslim, and now my best friend was no longer a Muslim. But I ended up continuing with Islam for several reasons. One of the reasons was that my best friend was an apostate from Islam, and Muhammad ordered his followers to execute apostates. Islam's most trusted sources are filled with passages like Sunan Ibn Majah 25:35. It was narrated from Ibn Abbas that the Messenger of Allah said, "Whoever changes his religion, execute him." Back in 2005, 2006, Islam was growing rapidly. The bigger Islam gets, the more aggressive it becomes. My best friend was an apostate, and Islam calls for apostates to be executed. Not being a coward, I decided to keep going after Islam. But something interesting happened over and over and over again. I would tell people, Muhammad ordered his followers to kill apostates. And people would respond, "No, he didn't. I know, because I have a Muslim friend, and my Muslim friend doesn't believe that at all." Somehow, in the minds of Westerners, Islam is defined by whatever Westernized Muslims believe, not by Allah and Muhammad. So quoting Islam's most trusted sources to them was absolutely meaningless because nice Muslims were saying something completely different. But now things are changing. Now we have popular Muslim apologists openly declaring that ex-Muslims will be executed if Islam wins. Here's Ali Dawah telling the apostate prophet that in a state governed by Islamic law, the apostate prophet and others like him will be executed.
So this is an ideology that calls for the murdering of people, whether it be blasphemy or apostasy, or this is a sexual slavery. This is a religion that calls for murder. And our political class, our globalist shills, have also signed us up to open door immigration and the Islamization of our countries.
This is a part of our religion. There's a reason to it. Yeah? There's a reason why there's a capital punishment. Because people like you, little weaklings, who leave their religion and cause corruption in the land by spreading it, the capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have...
So there be murder. So, I mean, this is a death cult. This is a cult that advocates killing people that don't agree with them.
No doubt. And we're proud of that.
So he's basically, he's saying that in the UK, he's not being charged with the fact of advocating murder through the state.
Yeah, capital punish will be applied in an Islamic state.
But this isn't an Islamic state, but it's increasingly becoming one. And why is this guy not getting deported?
Yeah, not individuals going and doing it themselves. Like,
all right, so, and this is what the title of my video is. This comes from anarcho-Islamic murder to state-sanctioned Islamic murder, which is obviously much better, where the state can murder you because you don't believe in the child rapist death cult.
Idiots, yeah? No, under an emir, it is done, yes. And we, you know what, we'll be watching.
Oh, they'll be watching. So there's been 80 mass murder attempts since 7/7.
So the Dawah team is
in the UK
working tirelessly to spread.
Not to mention Chris Donald's murder, the other two, one guy that got murdered down in England with two other people getting stabbed. The people getting there's many examples of that.
Islam, so that they can establish an Islamic state. And if they ever get what they want, what will happen to people like the apostate prophet,
or you and I, sexual slavery for non-Muslims,
and Abdullah Samir and other ex-Muslims?
Death for atheists, death for women who don't, blasphemy, death, apostasy, death.
They'll be executed, not by random mobs of Muslims, no. It will be orderly.
So the state is going to carry out murder just like it does in Pakistan?
The Islamic State will execute them for refusing to believe in the most obvious false prophet in history. You might expect Adam Saleh, a Muslim YouTuber with nearly 5 million subscribers, to reply in the comments, "No, we don't want to execute apostates. Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance." Instead, after watching Ali Dawah publicly proclaim that the goal they're striving towards includes executing apostates, Adam Saleh replied, "Allahu Akbar." Muhammad Hijab agreed, declaring, "This apis apostate makes me sick. Great to see the team humiliate this creature." Now think about this. I say, Islam calls for the killing of apostates. The response comes, "Stop lying. I have a Muslim friend, and I've never once heard her say that she wants apostates to be executed." So I say, guess what? Your Muslim friend is not, has never been, and never will be an authoritative source of Islamic doctrine or practice. Islam's authoritative sources declare that apostates must be killed.
So
and the response comes,
I would just like to draw your attention to these guys, including Ali Dawah. These guys are all Taliban, or not Taliban, but scholars under Yasir Qadhi.
I say, Islam calls for the killing of apostates. The response comes, "Stop lying. I have a Muslim friend, and I've never once heard her say that she wants apostates to be executed." So I say, guess what? Your Muslim friend is not, has never been, and never will be an authoritative source of Islamic doctrine or practice. Islam's authoritative sources declare that apostates must be killed. And the response comes, "You're just being an Islamophobe." Well, is Ali Dawah an Islamophobe? Because he's publicly proclaiming that he's watching apostates, and that when the time comes, apostates will be executed.
By the state, rather than the mob.
Notice, if you're an apostate, it's in your best interest to oppose the spread of Islam. But as soon as you oppose the spread of Islam, millions of Westerners are ready to tell you that you're a racist and a bigot and an Islamophobe, as if it's racist and bigoted and Islamophobic to not want to be executed.
I'm going to leave that there, but Dave's absolutely bang on the ball as always. What did they had a wee funny ditty? We're proud of that. I don't know if it's here.
It would be amazing if I could come together with you.
Reacting to a video.
Right. I don't think it's there, unfortunately. So, you guys, same day there. So, I don't know what's happening with the chat here. Obviously, there's no... And this is delayed or backed up, was unable to save the data from the blah, blah, blah. So...
And I am disappointed. I mean, I'm starting to notice some people in the comments. Yeah, like this is exactly, part of what I want to talk about today. This commenter says, Yasir Qadhi didn't say anything wrong in that video. Justice can't be served by vigilante mob, only the Qadhi. As in...
So the mob... Although that's not true, because Dave Wood also did the thing about the killing of the sex slave of somebody who knew Muhammad, and they killed the sex slave and the baby for insulting Muhammad. So he took law into his own hands there right from the start, and Muhammad praised him. So that's not true either.
Only the judge. Let's not get ahead
of
it.
So a judge can then call for the murder of people who blaspheme.
Ourselves right now, and let me show you Yasir Qadhi's video. So I'm going to be sharing it. I'm going to be reacting to it live. I will not live. I've kind of seen this video or skimmed it, but I might pause here and there to make a comment. And I'm going to speed up the video a little bit just so, so it doesn't take way too long. So let me put that video on. So the title of the video is Blasphemy Laws versus Vigilante Mob Justice. Reflections on the incident in Sialkot, Dr. Yasir Qadhi.
Holes in the narrative. Let's have a look at. So he basically has now said this character has done a Zoom call or a WhatsApp call with Mohammed Hijab and Ali Dawah and other dope balls, and that he's basically said there's holes in the narrative.
Every single student of knowledge knows, who studies Ulum al-Quran, that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at. And the
different official Arabic pronunciations of the Quran. Differences in official Arabic texts in the Quran. I think the British Museum has got a very old Quran as well.
Concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf.
So the different official Arabic pronunciations of the Quran, differences in the official Arabic. In Arabic, there is like one word with multiple meanings for a number of various words. I actually really like Arabic. I enjoy speaking Arabic, but there's different. There's like a universal word for multiple meanings, so that this is basically what he's talking about, and obviously various pronunciations of the Quran. So basically it's very difficult to get a unified source because of the multiple meanings on one word that can mean slightly different things.
Ahruf and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 7? And the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf. This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't.
So you're basically a parrot. You're not thinking for yourself. You're basically just rote learning. You'll say what we tell you to say. Oh, Jesus.
Fully comprehend.
So you don't need to comprehend. So basically, you're just an automaton.
Do a deep dive is when things
when you actually start to read it and understand it.
Get very, very awkward and difficult.
Yeah,
and
I bet it does.
This isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba.
Yeah, because it's nonsense.
This is not a joke, brothers and sisters.
No, it is a bit of a joke.
The issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay.
Ubay was the best Quran reciter, Baqarah 4999, yet he disagreed with the official version compiled by Zad bin Thabit Sahid al-Baqarah 5005.
Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes,
these guys are mental.
What is all of this stuff? Again, this is you're asking some very honest questions. It's the first time I'm saying these things. Many people are aware who listen to my lectures that I've mentioned the crises that happened to me at Yale. This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they not
imagine spending all your time learning about a book that was written 1400 years ago. get a new book.
Not quite fully certain
Majnoon.
how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there.
Yeah, science, that's what it's called. There's the big guy there. Oh, no. Who's listening to this? There's holes in the narrative, big man, apparently.
These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically?
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people outside of, by our academics, by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have.
There's always brainwashing. We don't like to think for ourselves. That's why we learn it in rote.
For the Quran, we should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah.
That's great. The truth shouldn't fear inspection. That's great. We don't need to take any sort of analytical approach to the Quran and the Hadith. The Sunnah.
When you go to academia, they don't have that red line.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Because it's all up for debate. That's right. That's in the as it should be. Especially the nonsense that's coming out of there.
And they're gonna just, you know, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes.
Yeah. That's the Quran and the Hadith.
They're gonna just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well,
yeah, that's right. It doesn't make any sense. That's it. Bingo. You've got it. Halas.
That's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly.
I'll mention them explicitly.
You know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing it.
Sahih Muslim 2086 Sunan Ibn Majah in 1944. Both passages tell stories of lost parts of the Quran that were never recovered. Well, I think that might have filled out the missing parts.
Anything you do. They'll bring you riwayat and they'll bring you athar, and then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. And then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm...
Say that again. The standard narrative, so the Quran has holes in it. Oh dear. So Islam has holes in it, right? Okay, let's hear them again.
Specialist, that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what...
Well, that's a bit of a problem for the Word of God, that the Word of God is now not being preserved perfectly if it's got holes in it, which is correct.
Student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now well known.
Yeah, you want to maybe turn to science.
In the Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. And by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be answered.
Then Muhammad Hijab has him on.
I like this guy's wispy beard.
On again. And this has to be probably the...
I'm not sure if this guy's like a paedophile or something. That's why he's joined Islam. I don't know. He looks a wee bit shady.
The most damaging podcast, I think, to date.
The most damaging podcast. That my religion's bollocks. That's quite damaging.
In regards to the du'at and the destruction it caused. He goes on to
There's big holes in your narrative.
Muhammad Hijab's platform and starts giving the preservation of the Quran.
Yes, I already knew there was parts missing as well, to be honest with you, before we even started being slightly critical, but from me actually reading it, probably about 2014, that I was aware that there was parts missing in the Quran just through my own personal studies.
Question. Ever since that podcast, subhanAllah, those of us who are involved in da'wah, like myself,
converting non-Muslims to the child rapist death count.
Specifically, I'll talk from my own experience. The amount of comments
Yeah, because now you can't just flat out lie to people without them questioning what you say. It must be rough. That's on the screen.
Get from Christians, from people who are against Islam.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Wait until we go into them.
And they want to sow seeds of doubts.
Yeah, seeds of doubt. There's major question marks, buddy.
Minds of Muslims. over and over and over again, they use speech and quotes from Yasir Qadhi from
I don't think we're not. Well, we will see Yasir Qadhi in a minute talking about something. But the problem isn't from Yasir Qadhi. The problem's from the ideology, the underlying ideology, political ideology as well, which is hence why I'm commenting on it.
Muhammad Hijab's podcast to try and do that. It's like every single day on social media. The reason I embraced Islam fundamentally
I'm a pedo.
in the very beginning was because I saw that the Bible wasn't preserved. I wanted to...
There's big holes in the narrative from the Quran, apparently. Well, we know there is, because there was there was parts of the Quran, allegedly, that was burnt, I think, or eaten by sheep or something. There was something strange.
No, did Allah give us a preserved...
No, there's 27 various, with different context, based on probably what he's saying with the words having multiple meanings in Arabic. There was, when the translation came, there was different ways of actually translating it. So there's 27 or 28, at least various different types of Quran. So the answer to your perfect preservation is no. You might be able to go back in the British Library and there might be an early Quran in there, I think.
Scripture? And when I found...
This is possible a position you get yourself in when you don't do 10 minutes of research to investigate a claim and base your life on lies. That's on the screen as well.
Clearly...
I don't know who wrote this. Holes in the narrative. I don't know who did this. Let me see. Holes in the narrative. Earn Nothing is the name of the YouTube channel this is on.
The speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, clearly it has been preserved. Clearly, no doubt about it.
What are you preserving anyway? Killing the homosexuals, the killing apostates, the burning to death of people. What are you actually preserving, you clown?
Has been like the main talking point when I give da'wah to people, to Christians specifically.
Oh, dear.
So for that podcast...
Yeah, blew it right home, didn't it, buddy?
To put a question mark on that for people.
Well, I think your sex slavery and everything else should put a question mark on it, should it not?
Well, I mean, the damage it caused, subhanAllah, I don't...
People himself, quotation marks, people himself.
It's beyond...
Rather than reevaluating his beliefs or even questioning what the actual beliefs are, questioning their validity, he is more concerned about how this will affect his ability to potentially deceive people and future converts in the future. All right.
You know, if you can't internalize and understand how horrible of a thing that happened, then I can't explain it to you.
Oh, subscribe to this character. Earn Nothing is the name of this YouTuber. So let's go back to Mr. Qadhi with the mask off, shall we? And apostate Aladdin. Good man, go and subscribe.
All right, let's hear what he has to say first. Let me see if I can get this working. All right, there we go.
Today's khatira.
So, resident scholar of Epic, Dr. Yasir Qadhi, right? Okay, this is blasphemy laws versus mob justice. So, anarcho-Islamic murder versus state-sanctioned Islamic murder. Carry on.
Is going to be
audio okay?
Somewhat sensitive.
Somewhat sensitive. Oh, he's an Islamophobe. Oh, right, I see, but they want to kill you. Oh, no, they don't. It's just Islamophobia. Shut up, you idiot.
Come to me and ask me about what has happened in Pakistan of the killing of a person.
They burn him to death. A mob took him out for taking down a poster, beat him and burn him to death.
For those of you who are not aware, there was a manager, a non-Muslim manager, who...
A Sri Lankan national. And I can't believe the Sri Lankans wouldn't be very happy.
Apparently tore down a poster. And on that poster was salat upon the Prophet ﷺ. And because of this, the people revolted against him, erupted in anger, a mob formed, and they killed him and burnt him. And they said this is justified because it is blasphemy. It is dishonoring the Prophet ﷺ. I have gotten a lot of emails and some of you asked me, is there something called blasphemy laws in Islam?
Yes, yes.
And before I answer this question, I would...
Yeah, I'll try and warm it up a bit before I say the word yes.
I'd like to state the question itself is actually not the right one to ask.
Oh, no. The right one is, why does your religion want to murder people? That's the right question to ask. Why does your religion want to have sex slaves, you big fat pervert?
You have jumped 10 steps ahead, and you're
10 steps ahead.
asking, is there something called blasphemy laws? But the reality is that what happened is a tragedy, regardless of what the books of fiqh and laws say.
Oh, yeah, it was a tragedy. A tragedy would be him falling off a roof accidentally. That would be a tragedy. This is absolutely vicious. This just absolutely highlights what Islam is.
Okay, I gotta pause him right there. So, in a sense, he has a point. First, we have to
No, he doesn't, mate. He doesn't. I don't want to interrupt you because you're a nice fella, but no, he doesn't.
arrive at why are we discussing blasphemy laws? I mean, I wonder why after someone was lynched for blasphemy. What
Hey, this isn't just the first time. This is the most pronounced, but they're also doing it through, they're raping Christians and Hindus and Sikhs and probably atheists in Pakistan. So this isn't the first time that this has happened.
is the connection? Who knows? But if we do want to follow on that logic, we will arrive at a point where we have to discuss blasphemy laws. So it's not that outrageous to skip it.
So it's either you get set on fire and beaten to death and tortured by the mob, or the state kills you through the can and these blasphemy laws through the judicial system through because of Islam. Come on, which way do you want to die?
Ahead and get to the source
Oh, don't worry. So you cannot like to say that. It's Islamophobic.
of this.
They made up word.
But let's hear him out about the distinction, between what they did and what should have happened.
Oh, what should have happened? Oh, well. Anarcho Islamic murder versus state sanctioned Islamic murder. Okay, that's great.
Because no scholar and no madhab and no sensible person in Islamic history has ever allowed mobs to become judge, jury, and execution.
That's not true. It's in the Quran that the guy killed his sex slave who was pregnant, and the baby came out her, I think, after stabbing her in the stomach because he blasphemed. Dave Wood's done this, blasphemed against Muhammad, and Muhammad said, oh, that's okay, you're forgiven.
So the very fact that we jump to the question, what does fiqh say, indicates we have lost some steps in the middle.
You've lost between your ears some steps in the middle.
Regardless of what happens in a court of law, the mob does not become the court of law.
All right, I see. So the court of law then gets to kill the person who doesn't believe in the child rapist death cult.
Okay, I think this gives away the whole twist here. He's saying, don't let the mob handle it, let the court of law handle it. It gets more damning than that.
so this doughball is now saying, don't let the mob actually kill people, although they're blowing people up left, right, or trying to blow people up left, right, and centre in the UK, stabbing them, killing them all over the UK because of the globalists that are allowing this to happen, including wee Nippy. But no, don't worry about that, guys. Do not worry.
So we have to understand.
Are you guys saying anything? Not a thing. So nothing on the chat here. Am I coming through here?
This is a switch bike.
So I've got one person
This
watching.
is a switch bike. No.
Because of the globalists that are allowing this to happen, including wee Nippy. So that's very weird. So 2 likes, 1 person watching, no comments. And can't back up. Delayed write failed. Windows was unable to save all the data. So here we go.
At this point that we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, how is this happening?
Because it's in your books. You big doughball.
You know me, I don't mince my words.
I wish you would. You see me mince when you're walking.
I ask you a blunt question.
Yeah, why are you a Muslim?
A bunch of people of the Hindutva ideology had done this to a Muslim.
Yes, well, I think initially it was the Muslims who, when they invaded India, they slaughtered, I think it was one of the biggest genocides ever, when Islam invaded India, and they just slaughtered the Hindus because they saw them as being pagans or whatever, non-believers, and there was piles of heads and everything else by the Muslims.
If a bunch of Zionist settlers had done this to a Palestinian, what would your reaction be right now?
Yeah, but I don't know if it says it in the Hindu books or the Israeli books to kill Muslims, but it does say for Muslims to kill everybody else that's not a Muslim.
How would be that anger and that rage legitimately? Then why is it among some people, not all, that when it happens in our lands by our people,
because it's in your books,
there is a deafening silence?
Because it's in your books, and you all know that this is actually written by your prophet to be allowed to do, to kill people if they blaspheme, whatever that means, against the child rapist death cult.
Why the double standards? Mob mentality is never justified, ever, in any system, especially our system. And when one of ours makes a mistake...
It says it in the Quran, so that's a lie. Let's just actually do this with Dave Wood. So here we go. This is the true explanation.
Pakistan, the Sharia-compliant hellhole you'd love to live in if you were the exact opposite of whatever you are now. Pakistan, where you can kidnap, rape, torture, and forcibly convert a Christian or Hindu girl, and a mob will attack the victim's family unless they all keep their mouths shut. Pakistan, it's just like Afghanistan, but with nuclear weapons. Seems like every time Pakistan is in the news, it has something to do with a mob of morons shouting Allahu Akbar while brutally murdering someone for hurting their feelings over the most obvious false prophet in history. Today is no different. Let's read about a factory manager who was beaten, murdered, and set on fire for blasphemy while the crowd cheered with glee and posed for selfies in front of the burning body. We won't bother going to Islam's most trusted sources unless someone says something really stupid about this having nothing to do with Islam. Al Jazeera reports. A Sri Lankan factory manager in Pakistan has been beaten to death and set ablaze by a mob, police confirmed, in an incident local media reported was linked to alleged blasphemy. The incident took place in Sialkot, about 200 kilometers southeast of the capital Islamabad, on Friday. Few issues are as galvanizing in Pakistan as blasphemy, and even the slightest suggestion of an insult to Islam can supercharge protests and incite lynchings. Prime Minister Imran Khan said he was overseeing the investigation into the horrific vigilante attack, as he called it a day of shame for Pakistan. A day of shame? More like a century of shame. Imran Khan, of course, is one of the world's leading defenders of the death penalty for blasphemy, so you know, with him overseeing the investigation...
So Imran Khan advocates murdering people that don't believe in the child rapist death cult.
Pakistani police are really going to pretend like they're doing something until the media attention dies down and everyone who beat and killed the man will be treated like heroes. Let there be no mistake, all those responsible will be punished with full severity of the law, he tweeted. If there's one thing we can always trust in this world, it's a tweet from a politician. A police official in Sialkot, who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the case, said investigators believed the attackers had accused the manager of blasphemy for tearing down a poster with Islamic holy verses. Pakistan, where tearing down a poster gets you thrown in a toaster. Several gruesome video clips shared on social media showed a mob beating the prone victim while chanting slogans against blasphemy. Other clips showed his body set ablaze, as well as the overturned wreckage of what was said to be his car. Many in the mob made no attempt to hide their identity, and some took selfies in front of the burning corpse. Punjab government spokesman Hassan Kaur told reporters in Lahore that police have already arrested 50 people. CCTV footage is being carefully looked into as we have been directed to complete the inquiry within 48 hours, he said. The slogans chanted in the social media videos were the same used by supporters of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, TLP, an anti-blasphemy party. TLP sounds like another abbreviation for toilet paper. Just imagine an entire political party whose platform is executing people for blasphemy. Gotta love Pakistan. The TLP has in the past paralyzed the country with protests, including an anti-France campaign after Paris-based satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo last year republished cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. You mean cartoons like these? Ha ha! How's it feel, TLP? No one expects the Muhammad cartoons. Let these images burn into your eyes the way you burn people for blasphemy. Mob killings over accusations of blasphemy have been frequent in Pakistan, where the crime can carry the death sentence. Tahir Ashrafi, Khan's advisor for interfaith harmony, in Pakistan? Sounds Orwellian, but it's Pakistan. Talk about worlds colliding. Tahir Ashrafi, Khan's advisor for interfaith harmony, condemned the killers in a recorded video statement shared on social media. It is a barbaric act and against Islam's teaching, he said. This guy can't be saying that it's against Islam to kill someone for blasphemy. Pakistan defends the death penalty for blasphemy by showing that Muhammad ordered his followers to kill people for blasphemy. So he must be saying that vigilante justice is against Islam, and here he's just contradicting his own prophet. Sunan Abu Dawud 4361. It was narrated that Ikrimah said, Ibn Abbas told us that a blind man had a female slave, she was his slave girl, who had borne him a child. So, like Muhammad, this man had sex with his slave girls, who reviled the Prophet and disparaged him, and he told her not to do that, but she did not stop, and he rebuked her, but she paid no heed. One night she started to disparage and revile the Prophet, so he took a dagger and put it in her stomach and pressed on it and killed her. There fell between her legs a child who was smeared with the blood that was there. The next morning mention of that was made to the Prophet, and he assembled the people and said, By Allah, I adjure the man who did this to stand up. The blind man stood up and came through the people, trembling, and he came and sat before the Prophet. He said, O Messenger of Allah, I am the one who did it. She used to revile you and disparage you, and I told her not to do it, but she did not stop. And I rebuked her, but she paid no heed. I have 2 sons from her, who are like 2 pearls, and she was good to me. Last night she started to revile you and disparage you, and I took a dagger and placed it on her stomach, and I pressed on it until I killed her. The Prophet said, Bear witness that no retaliation is due for her blood.
Hey, sex slaves and murdering people.
This man brutally murdered the mother of his children, and there was...
Yeah. So back here we go. Back here we going. We okay here? I think everything's okay. Looks okay. What are we seeing? Are we seeing anything? Oh, no, that's it. Windows unable to save all the data from WD backup. David blah, blah, blah. So... Is everything coming through okay? So it's a bit strange, isn't it? So we've still only got, we've got still no chat. And all the data from, and where's the viewing figures? Can't See the viewing figures. So it's a bit strange, this, isn't it? It's almost as if it's getting suppressed. Right, Dave, thank you very much. That was excellently done. Let's go back here. Well, let's see the viewing figures. No viewing figures, all right. So, let's go back to Yasir Qadhi.
We should be the first to publicly say we have nothing to do with this. It is reported in Sahih Bukhari.
Here's the first issue. When someone does something like this, we should be the first to come out and say we have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I know, but that would be lies, as I've just pointed out from Dave Wood, who read out of the Quran that you do have something to do with it. In fact, it's intrinsic to the ideology.
But that's kind of the evasive issue of...
I think it's Talia or Talia, which I'll come on to later.
This is not real Islam. Those are not real Muslims.
Yeah, this is real Islam. They do it at state level. Imran Khan wants to kill people for blasphemy.
400 people will happen to be in that area. And
at a state level rather than narco-vigilante justice.
Cheering them on in Pakistan and in the world. That's not us. That's not Muslims. But that's skirting the issue. And I'm not saying we should go out and ask every Muslim to, be held responsible for this, but you're the scholar. You're supposed to tell us what's wrong with this whole thing, not just, this is not us. Let's separate from it.
That the Prophet ﷺ sent Khalid ibn Walid to an expedition and he made a mistake and he killed some people he shouldn't have killed. Sahih Bukhari, as soon as the Prophet ﷺ found out, he publicly stood up, he raised his hands, he said, "Oh Allah,
wouldn't he have been killed anyway due to blasphemy laws? Or even prisoned, sorry.
Associate in front of you from the actions of Khalid. I didn't tell him to do this. This is his, not on me. He publicly made a disclaimer. Islam has nothing to do with a mistake. It was a mistake. Inshallah, Allah for...
Have you guys caught that? Let me play it back a little slower.
As soon as the process of in Sahih Bukhari.
The hadith in Sahih Bukhari is going to talk about it. This is supposed to be an example that exonerates Islam.
That the Prophet sent.
And what they do is they sort of take wee bits out of context and then say it's not Islam.
Khalid ibn Walid to an expedition and he made a mistake and he killed some people he shouldn't have killed.
He killed some people he shouldn't have killed. It's been full of, he killed all the Jews as well. Killed tons of people.
He made a mistake and he killed some people he shouldn't have killed.
He killed some people he shouldn't have killed. Wait, maybe the Pakistani guys killed a person they shouldn't have killed.
A Sahabi, Khalid ibn Walid.
Bukhari, as soon as the Prophet found out, he publicly stood up, he raised his hands, he said, "Oh Allah, I dissociate in front of you from the actions of Khalid."
Oh, well, that's okay then.
So we're learning it from the Prophet himself. As soon as it happened, the first thing the Prophet wanted to say is, "Allah, it wasn't me."
It's not me. They've been doing that for 1400 years.
To do this. This is his, not on me. He publicly made a disclaimer. Islam has nothing to do with a mistake. It was a mistake. Inshallah, Allah forgave him. But you cannot just...
Did you catch that?
Inshallah, let's forgive the 100 people that were taking selfies with the Sri Lankan guy that was set on fire.
It's a mistake. Inshallah, Allah forgave him.
Inshallah,
He's praying for the person who killed people he shouldn't have killed. That's the problem here. We're always going to be defending these religious characters. Like maybe he's saying it to be nice, may Allah forgive him, but he didn't give for 1 second, nor did the Prophet do anything. All the Prophet did was say, "God, I didn't do this. I didn't tell him to do it."
me.
Let the records show that Muhammad didn't call that hit. What good is that? He didn't...
But Muhammad killed all the Jews in Medina, didn't he? He used to pull down the pants to see if they were in puberty, and then he slaughtered them all. So the intrinsic... narrative even back then was the extermination and anti-Semitism against Jews, because the Jews, I think in Mecca, had rejected them because obviously they found out he was a nutter.
He didn't punish the person who killed a bunch of people. Isn't it supposed to be one soul for one soul? Wasn't he supposed to be punished? But instead the Prophet just washed the hands off of the blood off of his hands. And that's the example that the Prophet gave Muslims today, so I don't blame them.
Be quiet in the face of this mistake. Muslim communities cannot be quiet. And people are asking, and it is an incorrect question, what does Islam say about blasphemy? Regardless of what Islam says about blasphemy, that is not to be done by individuals, by mobs, by factory workers. And the very fact that this is so common, and the very fact that society is jumping to the 10th question indicates we have bigger problems we have to worry about. But to quickly answer the question before moving on to the crux of the matter, what does Islam say about blasphemy? It is true that in an Islamic society...
So if we import through Boris Johnson, the Conservatives and all other globalist shills, import all these people from these backward countries who believe in backward things into the UK to do population replacement while our population goes down, then we are going. The future generations are going to be under these absolute loon balls, these inbred loon balls.
We will have red barriers that publicly cannot be done. Just like in this land, the purpose of law is civil order. And so when certain things happen that shouldn't happen, the law comes involved. So in an Islamic land, there's no question that we don't want open mockery of Allah and His Messenger. There's no question about that. And in our books of fiqh, there are regulations. Nobody can go in the public town square and shout, moving on to the crux of the matter. What does Islam say about blasphemy? It is true that in an Islamic society, we will have red barriers that publicly cannot be done.
So you can't say anything about the child rapist death cult in an Islamic country. So why would we invite these people into our country? There would be no point in having these people here. They might as well stay in an Islamic country where they can do whatever barbarism that they want to do. These are not civilized people. Yeah, and I'll come on to inbreeding that's part of this culture as well. This is not civilized. Unless the person has rejected Islam, they shouldn't be allowed to come here.
Just like in this land, the purpose of law is civil order. And so when certain things happen that shouldn't happen, the law comes involved. So in an Islamic land, there's no question that we don't
and obviously Islam's now in 50 countries and been expanded deliberately.
Want open mockery of Allah and His Messenger. There's no question about that. And
so, and the punishment of that is to be killed at a state level. So this is a murderous death cult.
In our books of fiqh, there are regulations. Nobody can go in the public town square and shout things against Allah and His Messenger.
There we go. There's the real answer.
Yeah. So if these fascists, these absolute fascists will kill you if you say anything bad against the child rapist death cult.
Of course. If Sharia was the law of the land, of course we're going to have rules. And the way that they phrase it, rules and laws and just making it all official. So no mobs, guys. Just take it to the court and we'll behead him there.
In an Islamic...
So anarcho Islam versus state mandated Islamic murder, both sides, either or. Just a murderous death cult.
That's not civil society.
Islam's not a civil society.
So if that person does this, there are laws in place. In the time of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Wait, just a second. So he's saying it is a disturbance if someone goes into the public square and screams, things about Muhammad and Allah, and that just can't be. Let me give you, like he slipped and he said Times Square. Let's take the example of Times Square in New York.
Where's that go? That's not an Islamic country.
Go to Times Square in New York and say whatever you want to say about Jesus, about any God. Maybe not Allah, because there might be, some people around who might hurt you for that. But just say anything about Jesus. Scream at the top of your lungs. What's going to happen? Absolutely nothing. If Jesus is up there, he doesn't give a crap, or he's going to deal with it. But here on earth, nothing's going to happen.
So not only, I'm just going to skip here. So obviously other people are getting tons of views. Let's go back onto this, see what's happening here. And
why do you get?
We've got nobody commenting, and concurrent answers, 2 likes, no new members, chat revenue. And I've got nobody watching here. Absolutely nobody watching. So why would there not at least be one person watching? So this has obviously been... And let me show you something else as well. So obviously Google and YouTube are the same company. Let's go into... So I'm getting this thing thrown up here. I don't even know what it is. So when I'm searching on YouTube, it's now coming up. Your system has detected unusual traffic from your computer network. And then I've got this down here. Delayed backup. Delayed failed. So the system has detected unusual traffic from your computer network. This page checks to see if it's really you sending the request. So what they want me to do now, to use Google as a over 18, Google wants to then get my credit card details or my passport details to use their search engine. So I would suggest that this is an absolute invasion of my privacy, and the Google should not be analysing what I'm searching for, and to the extent where they're actually then invading my privacy that much that it's being actually checked now. I mean, it's just disgraceful. All of it is absolutely disgraceful. Carry on.
And society doesn't fall apart. So why is it, by this sheikh's admission, if you have a Muslim society, right, just Islam...
If it's a Muslim society, it's okay to murder people who do not believe in Islam through blasphemy, and it's okay to murder people who have rejected Islam, who want to come away from it because it's a barbarous death cult.
Islam rules the land, and someone were to come out and say, you know, this and this about Allah and the Prophet, that would be civil disruption. Is it because we can't stop the violence that's going to occur because of that?
So that's obviously threats of violence, which we've already seen in the UK as well.
Or is it because people's feelings are going to be so hurt that the society is just going to break apart, you know, pearl clutching, but the Muslim way? Why is it so different?
Because I think if you do a deep dive into Islam, people are going to reject it. I don't think people in the Arabic world are stupid people. I don't think that I do not believe in supremacy over. I think all people are the same. It's the human race, not different races. But if you start to do a deep dive, then you start to question it, and that, people then start to go, hold on, this is terrible.
He's making it to be such a big deal that laws need to be implemented to keep the peace, but the peace is kept. If you go to New York, like I said, Times Square, and you shout whatever you want about any god, you're going to look like the crazy one, and that's the end of it. I mean, maybe eventually, if you're just making a disturbance, whatever it is you're shouting, that, you know, the cops are going to stop you because you're being a nuisance. But is the blasphemy law really about someone who shouts in the middle of the street, screw Allah? Or is it about more pointed talking about Islam, or any sort of talk about Islam that isn't kosher, you know, isn't halal?
Multiple times he was mocked by his opponents. Sometimes he forgave, and sometimes they were in fact executed.
Oh, well, that's okay then. And if that's your example now, it's fair enough if that was 1400 years ago, but if that's your example of the perfect man to be able to kill other people because of you being humiliated in some way, then I would suggest you've got a mental deficiency.
This is the reality, but they all went to him. There was all something done by him.
Incorrect.
And multiple times, people who mocked him and made fun of him, they asked for forgiveness, and they were forgiven.
All right, okay, so you beg for forgiveness or you're going to get killed.
Multiple times this happened. So we have these instances in the seerah, and from this, our books of fiqh have derived laws. And it is true that, without a doubt, that public disorder and public mockery of Allah and His Messenger will not be allowed in an Islamic...
Oh, will not be allowed? Well, why don't you go and live in an Islamic country, Dr. Yasir Qadhi? This is not an Islamic country.
Islamic land.
Don't just say will not be allowed. Just say the word.
You'll get murdered.
But
either by a mob or by the state, which will be taken over gradually, as we've seen by the globalists allowing people in who follow this ideology.
No. Before the but, say the words.
You'll get murdered.
They'd be executed.
Is public mockery.
Executed and murdered basically by the state rather than actually these people. I mean, it's disgusting.
And what is blasphemy? Our books of fiqh are very clear. Anything that is done that is blasphemous, it must be explicit, unambiguous, and clear, and it must be intentional. Two conditions at a bare minimum. There cannot be ambiguity. It must be explicit.
All right, so if it's explicit, then it's okay to murder people, you absolute doughball. This guy's a doctor. What university actually qualified this crackpot?
You cannot have two different opinions about it.
All right, okay, so we're going to murder everybody. Oh, you're very clever.
And it must be intentional. So suppose somebody dropped a book.
And put it in the bin.
And then we found out it's the Quran.
Oh, and then put it in the bin.
He goes, oh, I didn't realize it's the Quran. It just slipped from my hands. If he says it's unintentional, we take his word for it.
Hey, what difference does it make? Say put it in the bin.
We find an excuse for...
You see the example? If someone dropped the Quran, as long as it's unintentional,
but if it's intentional, you beg for your life.
don't punish them. Here's a Quran. Well, that one, there wasn't a Quran that fell. Here's a Quran. And this is not unintentional. I would do it, but I'm actually scared of my safety because, you know, mobs exist for some unknown reason. He's saying if I drop this intentionally, that is blasphemy. He just explained it. That is how low the bar is to behead someone according to Islam. And I'm not making this up. That's literally his words. He's just not saying the words.
And it's not just in Pakistan.
The example that he gave, he's saying if you accidentally drop the mushaf or you didn't know it was a mushaf and you didn't know it was going to offend anybody, there's no reason to execute you. But if you did it intentionally, and I would just do this and throw it, but I'm actually worried about my safety.
For the person, intention and must be unambiguous. In this particular case, this person was a non-Muslim. He did not read Urdu from what I understand. And it's his factory. He's the owner of the factory. And the rule is don't...
Oh, they burned the owner of the factory. Yeah, that was nice of them. That was nice.
Post anything on the factory without permission. So he pulled it down and
You see the multitude of excuses. Okay, so he doesn't speak Urdu. So he didn't know that was Prophet Muhammad. Let's just presume that's true. And then it's his wall and he doesn't want anything on it. Okay, so what if it is his wall and he does speak Urdu? And he's like, yeah, I don't want religious symbols on my wall, especially not the Muslim one. Is that sort of halfway justified? When you dig into these excuses that they keep giving, I mean, he's trying to make it seem like he's really nice. Oh, the guy didn't mean it. But what if he meant...
And it has to be pointed out as well that in Pakistan as well, there are protesters against this as well. I'm not sure if they were Christian or they're just liberal Muslims, or I'm not quite sure, or ex-Muslims, but there was protests against this, the killing in Pakistan. It's not, again, that every Pakistani is a religious zealot.
He didn't know, or even if he did,
Although I think there is quite a sizable proportion.
The niyyah was clearly not to make fun of the Prophet sallallahu.
I mean, it's obvious that the Pakistanis used to be Indian and used to be Hindu until they get conquered by, I think it was the Turks, and like the Albanians, and then they flipped to Islam.
The niyyah was to enforce order. So regardless of which madhab you follow, it's a mistake to jump to the fiqh and ignore the realities. Even if it was explicit and unambiguous and intentional, you bring in the law and order, you bring in the judge, you bring in the government.
And then it's okay to kill them.
And you do not take law into your own hands.
But it's the law that's the issue. It doesn't matter whether it's mob justice or state justice or what is called justice, but just murdering people who don't believe in your child rapist death count.
Wallahi, we have a problem, brothers.
Yeah, it's called Islam.
And sisters, when 400 people can gang up on one person and shout takbir and murder him viciously and take selfies
Did you hear that? Not real Muslims.
Burn that corpse, and they think they're doing something pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So I do appreciate at the core of this, he's saying, don't go out and do violence. I do appreciate that. And I'm glad he's calling them out. Unambiguously, he's just actually
just let the state do violence.
Describing how horrible it is. I am happy about that part. But he's still
underlying text in the Quran advocates for killing people.
Dishonest about the underlying issue here.
Which is the Quran.
He's saying don't lynch them publicly.
Get the state to do it.
Just go get, he said it, go get the judge. So go get our thug, our official thug who's going to execute them instead of having 400 people doing it on the street. Just do it, off camera.
We have a disease.
And as I said, there's multiple examples of this blasphemy law and people being murdered in Pakistan.
That needs to be spoken out against. And
yeah, it's Islam.
That is the disease of fundamentalism, disease of over-exaggeration, disease of ignorance. If any other society did this against
the holes in the narrative.
one of our own, what would we do? Yet when it happens amongst us, there is deafening silence. The
like this
irony
part.
of ironies, I was in Pakistan, by the way, 10 days
Yeah, he's
ago,
calling them
and
out.
I swear to you, as Allah is my witness, before the incident, because I was the government's guest, I met high-level scholars. I cannot mention their names.
Oh, brilliant.
And in every one of those delegations, and I have witnesses that were with me, before this incident, this was the one issue I always brought up. Because I said to them, there was a very senior mufti, cannot mention his name. I said to him,
Was it Poofty Woofty?
Sheikh Saab, what happens in Pakistan affects us in America.
All right. So, if you're killing people in the streets in Pakistan randomly, and people in the West say, "Hold on a minute, these guys are mental," it's obviously going to affect us in the West because we are trying to subvert and convert and kill in the West as well. And obviously, this is bad press. Over 80 mass murder attempts in the West and diversity barriers all over the place. Armed police going about because of Islam as well. But I guess diversity is a strength, isn't it?
Wait, did he catch that? Did he say a very senior sheikh? I can't say his name, and then he's like Sheikh Saab. I don't know if that was actually the name or just a placeholder.
What happens there becomes the front page of CNN and Fox News.
Wait, let me.
What happened? Because I said to them, there was a very senior mufti, cannot
Poofty.
mention his name. I said to him, Sheikh Saab, what happens in Pakistan affects us in America. What happens there becomes the front page of CNN and Fox News. It's not disconnected anymore. And I said to him, until our ulama, meaning our Pakistani ulama, stand up and teach the people they cannot do this. I said to him, what happens there will affect our communities here. The world is a globe. And I said, with utmost respect, I am also one of you. These types of incidents are not common in other lands. They're primarily in this land. And
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that. It's just the thing that happens in Saudi and not other Islamic
I
states.
said, the irony of irony, Sheikh Saab, I said,
I wouldn't say they're not. I mean, yeah, of course they're more common in Pakistan, but they've happened in the UK.
Yeah, and thanks to the globalists in our government.
So,
The,
and
the globalist parties protected by the media.
happen in other places as well. So let's not minimize the fact that they do happen elsewhere. But of course, they're a lot more openly done in Pakistan.
Mufti Saab, you know you are Mufti, I said.
Poofty.
In the Hanafi madhab, this is not even allowed.
Oh.
The one madhab that doesn't have blasphemy laws against Ahl Dhimma, against non-Muslims.
the kafirs.
The other three
Kafirs.
madhabs, they do, by the way. The Hanafi madhab, which is actually very logical if you think about it, the
Nothing about the nonsense you talk's logical.
Hanafi madhab says a non-Muslim cannot be executed for blasphemy because he is already upon blasphemy.
he's already a kafir, and that he will die. He's already out with the child rapist death cult.
So he said this is very logical when you think about it, the Hanafi madhab. So the other madhabs are not logical when you think about them? I'm very confused. How can one of the madhabs have a position that is logical and the other ones have an opposing position and not be illogical? Or is it also logical and just logic applies to anything?
Think about it.
Think about it.
Al-Kasani and others, the great Hanafi scholars, they say, what greater blasphemy is there than to consider the Prophet ﷺ is not telling the truth when he says he's a prophet? You see what I'm saying here, right? What?
The mass murdering, child raping, sexual slave trading, caravan robbing, anti-Semitic, I think camel urine drinking prophet is not a false prophet. The one that was talking to the devil, apparently, when it's in the Quran. I think all of the things, cut off girls' genitals, put them in bin bags in the desert, and I don't know, do you want me to keep going?
Greater blasphemy is there. We're allowing them to live in non-Muslim, in Muslim lands. So if he were to say something publicly, the max you can do is jail or in prison.
Oh, well, that's okay then. If you're only going to jail or getting for criticising, that's nonsense.
Don't actually execute. I said
that's okay then.
the Mufti Sab.
But that Sri Lankan guy would not have probably been a Muslim, I would have thought.
Mufti Sab, in Pakistan, where most of us are Hanafi here. Yet in our madhab,
I don't know what Hanafi means.
there is leeway in this, and yet still, for some reason, our land seems to be the most hardcore in this regard.
Yeah, it seems like you're a bunch of nutters.
I said, can you explain to me this conundrum, this problem? He smiled and he goes, "Agar mere paas jawab hota, main aapko deta. If I knew what to tell you, I would tell you. I don't know what to tell you, right? It's our people that are so jazbati, so emotional." And I said very bluntly, with respect, I said, "Sheikh Saab, Mufti Saab, if you don't collectively take a stand, if you don't collectively start preaching, something else might happen." I swear to you, I said this.
That's good.
When I was in the land to a senior Mufti, and now what happened, happened. Because we know this is the reality of that part of the world that we're all from.
Yeah, so basically what you're doing is Taqiyyaing and gaslighting the West and saying, oh, this is not part of Islam, which it is part of Islam. And you're basically lying because, you know, it makes Islam look terrible and makes you look like a bunch of barbarians. And that's the reality. But it's okay for the state and Imran Khan to take them away and execute them privately. That's the best method, is it? You absolute scumbag. And
I said to another sheikh I was with that, why is there so much silence? And he told me the reality. And because I'm in America, I can say this. Hum log sab dare hue baithe hain. He said this. We are all
idiots.
Terrified of who? Of the mob. The mob, because if you dare open this topic, you become Ghustakh Rasul. You become the one that is somehow not honoring the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what can you do when the leaders and scholars themselves are hesitant to speak? And I encourage them, because their land, in the end of the day, I'm a visitor, I encourage them to take the leadership in this regard. And we have to ask ourselves a very blunt question.
Yeah.
Where is this misunderstanding coming from?
Yes. Islam.
Even if they followed the Maliki position, the Hanbali position, the Shafi'i position, they would take this person to the court would look in, the court would say, this was ambiguous and there was no intention, so he should be forgiven.
What if there was intention?
Especially if they're Hanafi. There is no question then of blasphemy laws. It doesn't apply to non-Muslims. The max you can do is, as we say, ta'zir. But
all right, but you burnt a Sri Lankan who I don't think was a Muslim, so that's obviously quite clearly gaslighting as well, isn't it?
Question arises, and this is the awkward one I wanted to talk about. Why does this mentality exist? And I will tell you why. Because it deals directly with me and many of us here. This mentality exists because we have allowed this type of speech and rhetoric to become mainstream. Our leaders and clerics are preaching hatred of other people.
Yes, that's right. In the UK as well.
For years.
At least we're honest. So in Islam, it preaches hatred. Don't take them as friends. Don't do this, don't do that. So this does actually preach hatred. Correct. Thank you. At least I get some here. And that probably explains why they're blowing people up in the UK.
When you preach hatred and you keep on enforcing they're this and they're that and ye log aise and they're like this, those years and decades of hate, they become concentrated in the heart.
Yeah, that's some religion you've got there, pal.
See, I agree with everything he's saying. I just want to point out, he is not the hateful kind who comes out and says, you know...
I don't know about that, mate. Aladdin, I don't know about that. I mean, these scholars in the UK are not anything to write home about.
Disbelievers and so on and so on, like, you know, Westerners are this and that. Like, that's not...
I think he's just gaslighting for the Western audience.
That's Daniel Haqiqa chooses his brand. This is not what Yasir Qadhi does. But that's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because when you listen to what he's actually saying, and he's going to say more about that, you find that he's justifying a different form of it. That's all.
It's literally like you're pouring gasoline for years on a society.
But he's right about
then
that.
when somebody else lights the match.
All right, it's not you that lights the match, right? I thought it was the Muslims that throwing the match on the gang. Or it was somebody else. Was it the Buddhists? Was it the Taqiyyaing leaks? It wasn't the Muslims, because Muslims don't do that. Of course not. It's nothing in the books that says that, is there? Talia.
You say, oh, I didn't do that.
No, it was somebody else. Oh, blame anybody else.
But you did.
It's like a child.
Ironic.
By teaching your people who are
This applies
struggling
to
to be
you.
good
Teaching your children out the Quran that advocates doing this.
Muslims, struggling to pray 5 times a day, you are prioritizing hating other people.
Yes, correct. There you go. Bingo. I could leave it here quite happily.
What's going to happen? And this is the reality of the BJP. It is the reality of Zionism.
All right, I see. What aboutism is? It's everybody else. It's not Islam.
It is the reality of every far right in this country.
Oh, the far right in this country, right? I see.
What do? They keep on indoctrinating their people to hate another group of people. And
yes. Yeah.
My understanding of Islam, my understanding of the Seerah,
does advocate this.
We concentrate on our faults more than the faults of other people. And it's related to me directly. I'm being honest with you. You are my community.
I wish I could hear a lad in there. You need to switch off you need to stop the video, buddy. But I wish I could hear that, what he's saying there. I can't hear him.
To hate another group of people. And my understanding of Islam, my understanding of the Seerah, we concentrate on our faults more than the faults of other people. And it's related to me directly. I'm being honest with you. You are my community, as you are
often in the Quran.
Yeah, it does. And as an atheist myself, I've got a real issue with the Quran because it does. The Quran has never stopped talking about disbelievers and basically atheists and agnostics, and that's why they've got a problem with the apostates. Apostates can leave to join another religion. It doesn't have to be they become atheist or agnostic or non-believers. But the Quran keeps on banging on about killing disbelievers, and that's why, I mean, he's obviously probably from an Indian background, but that part, obviously, when the Muslims came in and conquered these guys, they would have probably been Hindus, probably, or Sikhs, and probably a lot better when they were.
Because you're concentrating on your faults.
But the Quran concentrates on everybody else. That's not a Muslim. That's what the Quran does. And the question is now for the Scottish Government, if the Scottish Government's so down on Scottish people being involved in slavery, why is it put mosques everywhere? Why is there mosque everywhere when you've got a prophet who was a slave trader?
Pinkwashing Islam, right? He's pretending as if none of this stuff is coming from Islam itself. I'm not saying he's out here preaching hate, but he's just not addressing the fact that the sources are the same. Where are they getting this from?
Yeah, it's called coming out of the Quran. That's right, my lad, and that's
people
correct.
Appreciate what I do, and other people are not so appreciative. And I have many who keep on releasing videos. The largest group.
You can hang a blasphemer, but you can't kill the person on the streets. Look at this laughing emojis, thinking act.
Of critics against me, he is too soft on the other groups. He doesn't speak the haqq against those groups. Do you know why I don't speak with those adjectives and nouns? This is exactly
because it's nonsense. No, it makes you feel even sillier than you already sound.
Exactly why. Because 20 years ago I used to. When I was 20 years old, that's exactly how I would speak. But as you grow in wisdom, in maturity, in experience, you understand that words have repercussions. You understand that when you preach and teach in a violent and vulgar manner, to a people who themselves just need to, you do not build your Islam by destroying the Islam of other people. Memorize this rule. You do not build your...
Oh my goodness. So you don't build... Oh my... I just cut out of there automatically.
Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. He's a leader of the Munafiqun. He's nothing but trouble.
So is that still going? We're still live? All right, I see. So let me get this. Let me just rewind here, because obviously that randomly shut down, which was a bit strange.
Future, but for now.
And the Ridda laws and the Hudud laws. And every...
So that includes, chopping off limbs and this and
that.
That's
all right then.
Around the world, asking the same question. Ulama, double my... Whoever curses the Prophet should be killed. Even if the principle is in the Sharia, we have to ask ourselves, where is this coming from?
Islam.
And the answer I told you, no
as your books.
matter how politically incorrect, somebody has to say it. Because if we don't say it and we don't preach against it, what's going to happen? We need to stop these preachers of hate. Some of them are who themselves just need to, Ya akhi, you do not build your Islam by destroying.
I think I'm about here anyway. Don't know how you
What do? They keep on indoctrinating their people to hate another group of people. And my understanding, the largest group of critics against me, he is too soft on the other groups. He doesn't speak the haqq against those groups. Do you know why I don't speak with those adjectives and nouns? This is exactly why. Because 20 years ago, I used to. When I was 20 years old, that's exactly how I would speak. But as you grow in wisdom, in maturity, in experience, you understand that words have repercussions.
Yeah, but you're advocating that instead of a mob murdering an individual and setting them on fire, you're advocating for the state to kill an individual for blaspheming against your nonsense. So you should be practicing this. That your words and what your religion advocates is violence, is hate, is all intrinsic to your religion.
Understand that when you preach and teach in a violent and vulgar manner,
which is Islam. It's not. There's not different. There might be different sects of Islam, but when you break it down to what the Quran and the Hadith says, that's what it comes from.
To a people who themselves just need to, Ya akhi, you do not build your Islam by destroying the Islam of other people.
All right, I see. Well, I mean, I guess this is sectarian violence, which we've had in Europe as well, between different sects of the same belief system. But
memorize this rule. You do not build your Iman by destroying the Iman of other groups.
Yeah, but we already know that between the Sunni and the Shia, there's a big problem there for 1,400 years or 1,300 years.
Even if the group is wrong, you correct the idea without preaching hatred.
Yeah, but Islam does preach hatred. You've just came 20 minutes into this and you said on numerous occasions you want to murder people not through mob violence, which it does say in the Quran to do, but through state violence. So what are you talking about? You absolute hypocrite.
It is possible to talk about other ideas without bringing people in, without preaching hatred. The main goal of this religion is personal tazkiyah. Come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are some people, they love to prioritize other people, other groups, conspiracy.
But it says in the Quran to prioritize, it gives you methods of how to kill homosexuals, how to stone women to death for adultery, how to kill apostates, to kill disbelievers, to kill everybody else other than the people that are in the child rapist death cult. You're a death cult.
See theories, they do this, they do that. And in the process, what happens? This deep-seated hatred and resentment comes.
Yes, which is taught intrinsically to the religion.
Such that the smallest...
Well, I would have to point out that not every Muslim is filled with this hatred. As I said, different degrees of religiosity, different depth of the understanding of what's in the books as well.
Ambiguous provocation. Ambiguous. And all of a sudden, 400 people think...
He needs to stop focusing on the ambiguity of the provocation. He's not realizing that this is very damning, that he's saying, guys, he didn't even mean it. So what if he meant it? If he meant it, then Yasir Qadhi wouldn't be talking about this at all.
So if he meant to drop the Quran in the bin, then it's okay to execute him. Wow, Lynn.
Basically, he wouldn't talking. He's talking about this because the guy didn't mean it.
This is a doctor. This guy's a doctor.
So therefore, we should have let him slip, or it wasn't that serious. So he should just go to jail because according to this madhab, the logical one, as he put it, he's still not addressing the crux of the issue.
So yeah, right. Don't worry, guys. If you're not a Muslim, you'll just go to jail for blaspheming against the child rapist death cult.
Think Nayar Takbir, and they kill somebody and they burn him and they take selfies thinking that this is something pleasing to Allah. Wallahi, we have to ask ourselves, where is this coming from?
The Quran. You've just said that they've just shown you that Imran Khan advocates the death penalty for blasphemy. So it's coming from the top down. They obviously know. I'm not saying that Imran Khan doesn't know about his own religion. He does. So it's coming from Islam. You're just gaslighting the West. You're just lying. You're a big fat liar.
And the answer I told you, no matter how politically incorrect, somebody has to say it.
Islam.
Because if we don't say it and we don't preach against it, what's going to happen?
Well, I don't think you want to go down that.
We need to stop these preachers of hate. Some of them are going around saying, "Man sabba nabiyyan faqtuluh." This hadith, aslan, it is not even authentic. There is no such hadith in the books of hadith. It is mentioned in a tertiary book, Al-Kamil fi Du'a.
You've got a great podcast, Apostate Aladdin. All I would say is, if you're going to talk into the mic, stop the video, because it's very difficult to listen to you and also hear the speaker. So stop, because I'm actually quite interested in hearing your commentary.
Which is not even an authentic. The book is about da'if hadith. And this preacher, may Allah forgive him, I have nothing against the person, never met him. He preached.
You see this? I don't like this attitude in Islam where
I don't like what attitude. What about, brother?
Attitude of if you see someone making a mistake, correct them in private so they're not embarrassed, or something like this. I have nothing against the guy who's preaching a hadith that causes people to kill other people. I have nothing against him. May Allah forgive him. No, you are too soft. You're too soft because, like, where's the spine? No, you should be able to say he did a bad thing. You don't have to say may Allah condemn him or whatever. Just, you don't have to kiss his butt as you're saying he did a bad thing. He did a bad thing.
Preaches to millions of people something that is not even authentic, and nobody corrects him. Whoever curses the Prophet should be killed. Even if the principle is in the Shafi'i school, it's not a hadith. The judge is the one after all of these entire trial. And by the way, even the Shafi'i and other schools, they say, if the person says he's sorry, he repents, you give him the opportunity to repent.
So if you don't say you're sorry, if the mob doesn't get you, you just have to beg for the judge not to kill you from the child rapist death cult. Oh, great.
And he's using this again as some kind of defense. That's like saying if you beg the mafia boss enough, he will let you, not be killed.
That's exactly it, buddy. That's a great Apostate Aladdin. That is absolutely spot on. That's exactly what it is. Thugs, fascists, basically fascists.
You don't realize that doesn't make it any better?
Yes, exactly. Exactly, mate. That's it. This guy's obviously very intelligent young man.
Tawbah is there. Who are you to come between a person and tawbah, even if it was intentional and ambiguous? And he says, you know what, I made a mistake. I ask Allah's forgiveness. I won't do it again. Some of them have say, even then, forgive him. But for us to do this mob mentality without any sense of justice. And the final point, and I've already dug myself deep enough, so Allahul Musta'an, but it has to be said, brothers and sisters. I am a minor student of knowledge in the grand scale of things. I don't consider myself to be a top-tier Shaykhul Islam. A'udhu billah. I'm a tawailib, as I say, minor student of knowledge. But I have spoken not to a few, dozens, maybe even 100 ulama around the world, asking the same question. Ulama double my age, maybe even triple a few years ago my age. Senior ulama. I have spoken to Shaykh Qadhi and others directly, many senior ulama, about this one issue. And I say this just so that you understand, this isn't coming from me. I have asked many ulama this question. In the modern world that we live in, is there room for renegotiating the laws of Islam as they apply to the nation state? Can we rethink through what can and cannot be done for the time being? Not a permanent ban, but rethink through the punishment.
Okay, so let's, is there a way we can put aside the blasphemy or whatever punishments?
All right.
Not permanent.
So this is where I was wanting to get to. This was, I had watched the young fella earlier on, and this is where I want to get to. This is the can we just put away just now murdering people by the state or murdering people by mobs until we take over the West and being allowed to by the globalists in our societies?
He will let you, not be killed. You don't realize that
even if the principle is in the Shafi'i school, it's not a...
So even if the point of murdering people if they blaspheme against the child rapist death cult is in the books, it looks bad in the West, so we can gaslight the people in the West through the globalists letting these people in, the dinghy divers, until we take over their country, and then we will impose the murdering of people who blaspheme against the child rapist death cult. Ah, right, I see.
Hadith, the judge is the one after all of these entire trial. And by the way, even the Shafi'i and other schools, they say, if the person says he's sorry, he repents, you give him the opportunity to repent.
And he's using this again as some kind of defense. That's like saying if you beg the mafia boss enough, he will let you, not be killed. You don't realize that that doesn't make it any better?
Tawbah is there. Who are you to come between a person and tawbah, even if it was intentional and ambiguous? And he says, you know what, I made a mistake. I ask Allah's forgiveness. I won't do it again. Some of them have say, even then, forgive him. But for us to do this mob mentality without any sense of justice. And the final point, and I've already dug myself deep enough, so Allahul Musta'an, but it has to be said, brothers and sisters. I am a minor student of knowledge in the grand scale of things. I don't consider myself to be a top-tier Shaykhul Islam. A'udhu billah.
Holes in the narrative. Did you ask them about the holes in the narrative?
Tawilib, as I say, minor student of knowledge. But I have
I don't think so. I think you're even less than that, buddy.
spoken not to a few, dozens, maybe even 100 ulama around the world.
Ooh, are they all mental like you?
Asking the same question.
Don't
Ulama,
worry,
double
Yasir.
my
The
age,
hadith
maybe
is
even
coming.
triple a few years
Ooh, triple your age. Ooh, when you were 10.
ago my age. Senior ulama.
Oh, I'm sure they must be a bundle.
I have spoken to Sheikh Qadhi and others directly, many senior ulama, about this one issue. And
I
I
can just picture them all sitting around, can you? Oh, it's dead interesting.
say
That's
this
talking about a guy 1400 years ago.
just so that you understand, this isn't coming from me. I have asked many ulama this question. In the modern world that we live in, is there room for renegotiating the laws of Islam as they apply to the nation state? Can we rethink through what can and cannot be done for the time being? Not a permanent ban, not
Not a permanent ban on murdering people by the state or by mob violence setting people on fire. Can we just gaslight the West until we kid on that this is not intrinsic to Islam? All right, I see. It's very clever.
rethink through the punishment.
Rethink through that's haram.
Okay, so let's. Is there a way we can put aside the blasphemy or whatever punishments, not permanently, is what you said?
No, just to gaslight the West.
Not permanently, because we might need them in the future. But for
Well, so we can kill people once we're in their lands.
now.
And the ridda laws and the hudud laws. And every
So that includes, chopping off limbs and this.
All right, that's good. Oh, chopping off limbs. All right, I see. So I think we should go on to the punishment of chopping off limbs or cutting the limb off a thief and other barbaric practices that are in Islam.
And that all these hudud laws, he's saying, can we just put them aside?
Can we just stop that, please? Can we just act like normal human beings that are not driven by pre-medieval times?
Not permanently, because that would be
No, because we might need them to kill people in other people's lands.
God's word, but just for a little bit, so that we can spread Islam a little bit.
single person that I have asked, because I asked those that I consider to be ulama, forward-thinking, open-minded.
Nothing forward-thinking, open-minded about Islam.
Everyone that I have asked has said the exact same thing, which is that, yes, this goes back to pros and cons, masalih and mafasid. And they give me examples from the seerah. The Prophet ﷺ was asked by Umar ibn Khattab, why don't you execute Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul? He's a leader of the munafiqun. He's nothing but trouble. Execute him. We know who he is. The Quran has been revealed about him. Execute him. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? No, I don't want people to misunderstand and say, I'm killing my own companions.
All right, okay. So don't kill other Muslims, kill the infidels. Set them on fire and beat them to death. Oh, no, don't do that. Just get the Imran Khan to execute them.
He took the PR into account. He understood that there are repercussions globally by doing something that might look good domestically.
So when we try and get the world caliphate so we can kill people in other people's lands, we might need these blasphemy things. Don't do anything that is Islamic, because it looks terrible from people who don't actually are not indoctrinated into this nonsense yet.
You see, he's saying the words himself. He's saying we have to curb this a little bit because PR. Even the Prophet did it. Like the Prophet.
Taqiyyaing, they've got a word in Arabic, means lying to non-believers, and it gives passages in the Quran on how to lie to non-Muslims to make them amenable to basically be taken over. That's what the left and we Nippy and all that want to do. And Boris, they've all had open borders for a number of years now.
Didn't want people to think that that he kills his own Sahaba, his own followers. That's just a political move. he's damning himself even more, and he's applying it today. He was saying, can we put aside these harsh rules because PR? This is him saying it. I mean, we accused him of that kind of thing. We say,
well, I don't think they're harsh rules. I think they're intrinsic to Islam. I think these are Islamic rules that are in the religious texts.
They're putting on PR for Islam, and we're right because they're admitting it.
When he conquered Mecca, he said to Aisha radiallahu
When he conquered, that was after Medina. When he conquered Medina, he killed all the Jews.
anha, I wish I could demolish the Kaaba and reconstruct it on the original structure of Ibrahim, but...
Now, the Kaaba was actually a pagan site where all predating the Muhammad, it was actually a pagan site. So when they walk around the black box in the desert, that's actually a pagan site with pagan... it used to be celebrated amongst the Arabs with pagan deities, basically.
The Quraysh are new Muslims. They wouldn't understand. They would reject this. They would think I'm destroying the Kaaba. I don't want to do that. So he left it
the host of the narrative did that.
On that. He understood there's something that you look at the pros and cons.
You know, that's the same excuse they give for why didn't Allah outlaw slavery? And part of it was...
there you go. So basically, Muhammad was a slave trader.
Because, well, the people, like, it was a big economy in the area, and it was just a necessity. And
so this is back to the point about do we need reparations from Africa for the white slave trade? Do the East Africans need it from the Arabs for the East African slave trade? And the Muslims and the Africans who enslaved and sold the slaves in the transatlantic slave, are these people needing to pay reparations to the people who were enslaved? And the difficult thing is we've seen two people in the UK who look of African origin. I think one had white parentage. So one was a slave owner through his African side in the West Indies, and one was a slave owner through her white side of the family, although she looks like she's African as well. Side of his family. So these people were black and white in the West Indies, both had slaves, just like the guy in America who had. So again, still no comments, and you can see obviously the channel's been subdued. We've got 2 viewers. American black American who wanted slaves. Am I still on here? Oh no, frozen. I have frozen again. Let's move the settings and see if we can do this. So it's just absolutely, it's freezing all the time. Oh, let's do this. Let's go for this one. So again, more mistakes, more problems with this. So, Africans sold black slaves into slavery.
I was an investment banker and a professor of business at the University of San Francisco.
Hey guys, it's Julesy, and let's get into another complex discussion within the African diaspora. Some of you like to call these the diaspora wars. Are you ready for it? I'm ready. Africans selling their own people, us, into slavery. And do African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, and any of the modern day descendants of enslaved Africans in the Americas have the right to hold modern day Africans accountable? I'm Julesy, head smart brown girl in charge, and let's get into this and go ahead and thumbs up, because whether you like it, love it, or don't agree at all, wow, it's still always a great discussion. So subscribe if you're new here. Now, I've seen this sentiment bubbling.
So this girl's name is Josley. Josie, Jouelzy. So I'll give her a wee subscribe. She's talking sense.
Over on Twitter and certain corners of YouTube, typically used to defend xenophobic sentiments African Americans are pushing against African immigrants in America. I do think it is worth interrogating this sentiment, because how else do you push back against xenophobia? It is estimated that 12.5 million Africans were shipped during the transatlantic
But the majority of that was to South America.
slave trade, with about 10.5 million actually surviving the Middle Passage, that is, crossing.
But you've got to remember, the slave trade wasn't there to kill Africans. The slave trade was to use their labour without paying for it. I think that was the reason for the slave. It wasn't like to commit genocide on the people that were being transported, because they had a value as property. Now, I'm not saying that's correct, and one of the things that she's not discussing here is the involvement of Muslims in the West African slave trade, which I don't know how big that was and much about it, but I think Muslims were also transported as well
across the Atlantics to the new.
But the thing about it is that they're not. She's probably not discussing there. I'm not going to go into that, but. I think it's this fellow. The Curious History of Anthony Johnson, from Captive American to Far Right Talking Point. See, they keep saying everything's far right. It's very annoying. Obviously, people don't understand politics. In various corners of the internet, memes circulate about a black man identified as Anthony Johnson. Now, as far as I know, there was a number of people, African Americans, in that were actual slave owners. Anthony Johnson was just the first one. Believed to be a pioneer of American slavery, and so there was also slave owners who were black in the Caribbean and slave owners who were not black, Africans of African descent in the Caribbean, as well as white people, and both sometimes the slave and the slave owner combined, and you've got somebody who's of ancestry of the slave owner and the slave themselves. So I don't know, are they going to pay themselves compensation? So they're trying to gaslight white people who have never had slaves in Scotland, who were never had, probably never even saw an African before, and they're trying to gaslight them that somehow they're responsible for slavery. And also the slave owners, some of them were of African descent in the United States as well at this time. So it's not just this guy. This guy was the first, because I think he went to court to actually have the right to own slaves himself. Identified as Anthony Johnson, believed to be the pioneer of American slavery. So you've got slavery that's done by Muslims apparently and Africans in Africa, who sold them to slave traders, which the Africans are also saying there was Jewish, I don't know if it's Jewish money or Jewish involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, but there's been a number of comments about Jewish involvement in the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and there was African slaves. So there were slave owners in Africa and slave traders in Africa, and people who enslaved other Africans, sold them as slaves. But there was also slave owners in the West Indies and America that were also of African descent. So it wasn't just one way by any stretch of the imagination. These memes reveal that the new ways people disseminate knowledge in the age of social media. Anyone with access to the internet and necessary software can generate a historical narrative that can gain this disconcerting popularity. Of course, memes are perfect for the established myth stories, as they do not ask the reader to evaluate the sources. Though it's not the only myth attached to American slavery. Now, this person is not saying that African Americans weren't actually slave owners in America as well, at this time as well. So, again, I think this is a bit of gaslighting. Memeing of Anthony Johnston manifests the unique challenges scholars face in combating historical misinformation as one of the few documented black landowners in the 17th century. So this is 1600s, and it doesn't tell you, I mean, slavery went on longer than that, so it doesn't tell you landowners in the 17th century Virginia, but it doesn't tell you about other places in the southern states who were slave owners as well. I heard a rumour that there was 1,000 or something like that who were of African American descent. His unique story has morphed into a manipulative trope using right-wing activities. So rather than actually addressing the history of this and finding out, it's just right-wing tropes and not actually dismissing it or making any judgment on the actual history of it, because it goes against the narrative, doesn't it? It goes against the communist narrative that all black people are victims. For the 1960s, 1990s, Johnston was prominently known among academics who studied slavery, but interested in his misrepresented life has recently gained traction with the advent of digital sharing discussing sites and public forums. For instance, as of July the 12th, 2019, Johnson's Wikipedia page claimed he was a colonist sold by Arab slave traders. Now, I don't know if they're Arabic, but certainly potentially Muslim slave traders from West Africa, though there is no citations from latter claim, nor is it supported by historians. It was likely added by the user who hoped to redirect blame for the transatlantic slave trade towards the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade was obviously the East African slave trade, but also the Muslim slave trade was the white slave trade from Africa. And I believe that there was a Muslim, it might not have been Arabic, but a Muslim slave trade in the transatlantic slave trade as well. So I think this person's gaslighting as well. They don't like it when the actual narrative is sort of changed slightly, their narrative, and they keep calling everybody who comments historically as right wing or far right or whatever adjective they want to use. But it doesn't. They've not actually addressed, is this true? So this is not historically reflective. This is just, if anybody disagrees or says anything, and then this is far right trope. Popular talking point among far right-wing commentators. In his podcast, disputing reparations for slavery. As I said, if the reparations are going to come, they would have to come from other Africans, because it was Africans who enslaved and sold other Africans into slavery. And some of these became slave owners in the West Indies and also America. This is historical fact. But this is only one guy. This is the first guy in Virginia, because there was a court case and this was actually documented, as far as I'm aware. In his podcast, Disputing Reparations for Slavery, conservative pundit Michael Knowles reiterates this myth about Johnston. Now, as far as I'm aware, the Johnston thing is not a myth, because there was court, he went to court, and there's court documents that the fact that Johnston actually asked to have slaves or wanted to have slaves without reviewing the available literature, such as historical distortions seek to minimise European culpability. All right, I say blame Whitey, culpability. Well, the Europeans were the people that transported the slaves, but as far as I'm aware, there was no enslavement done by invading armies to capture Africans. It was done through trade. But I'm not a West African, transatlantic slave historian, so I'm quite happy to be proved wrong. But this is what they're doing is a distortion of the narrative. In the podcast Disputing Reparations for Slavery, conservative pundit Michael Knowles reiterates this myth about Johnston without reviewing the available literature. Such historical distortions seek to minimise the European culpability in expanding African slavery, discredit the system intergenerationally impact upon African Americans. In 1621, Johnston was delivered to Virginia shores as an African captive, simply called Antonio. By mid-17th century, he became a landowner, newly named Anthony Johnston. His ability to gain freedom resembles the function of indentured servitude, in which an unfreed labourer is bound to work for landowner for a specific length of time. Once they satisfy the term for indentured servitude, they could freely acquire land and capital. Since Anthony Johnston was an unfree labourer of African descent, his freedom and property acquisition remain a source of confusion for Americans who are otherwise unfamiliar with how slavery evolved throughout the early decades of English colonialism. Central debate surrounding the parameters. Now, the thing about Anthony Johnston is, I'm sure he went to court, and I'm sure this is the guy that went to court and actually asked to have the right to own slaves. A central debate surrounding the parameters of colonial bondage was the status of captive workers, specifically in identifying servants or versus slaves. It is important to note that terminology was generally more fluid in the 17th century when compared to the hardened identities that emerged in the 18th and 19th century. Historians Linda Haywood and John Thornton note that English borrowed some of their deceptive words from other transatlantic enslavers, and such terms often did not acquire definitive legal clarification until the end of the 17th century. We are also limited by documents that rarely comment on the conditions or bound people with much specificity. Let me just go back. YouTube. Genealogy. Yeah. So this is, and I really like Ainsley Harrington. I think he's a great guy. I've always liked him on the TV. But this just shows you the complexity of reparations.
Let's return to the Jamaica archives to see if he can find anything that will take him further down the Harriet line.
How are you, Ainsley?
I'm fantastic. How you doing?
Come along.
First, he searches for information on Ebenezer's baptism and finds an entry on the International Genealogical Index website.
Ebenezer Harriet, male, birth 22nd of August, 1865.
This gives him Ebenezer's father's name, James Gordon Harriet, the key to tracing back the Harriet line.
Amazing, this. James Gordon Harriet.
Now he can look for James's baptism registration.
Is this for James Gordon Harriet? This is a record of his birth.
One of his baptism.
Baptism. Okay. Yeah, there it is. Look. June the 15th. James Gordon Harriet. Is that reputed son of George Harriet by, is that Bridget?
Bridget, yes.
Bridget de
Cherry.
de Cherry. Born November the 22nd, 1803. The baptism of white children in 1806. as my great-great-grandfather. I mean, it says baptism of white children. So the Harriet was originally a white name then?
Yes, yes.
That's amazing, isn't it? I need to sit down. This is so sorry. I'm not uncomfortable with it. It's extraordinary. That is amazing, man.
This extraordinary document reveals that Ebenezer Harriot's father, James Gordon Harriot, Ainsley's great-great-grandfather, was white and was born before the abolition of slavery.
On checking, I found property that he actually owned.
Oh,
yes.
More property.
Yes. Read.
Jamaica SS, a return of slaves in the parish of Manchester.
In the possession?
In the possession. Sorry, James Gordon Harriot as owner.
Mm-hmm.
On the 28th day of June in the year of our Lord, 1825. Oh my word.
So obviously that's a bit of a kick in the nuts that which Ainsley seems he's not bothered about his great-grandfather being white, although Ainsley does look quite African in his features, but also his white family were actually slave owners, whereas my ancestry probably wasn't. So I don't feel guilty for, obviously, that means if Ainsley was part of the slave class and the slave owner class, that he would have to give himself reparations. But under the reparations that who family, as far as we're aware, never was involved in the slave trade, would have to give Ainsley, whose family was involved in the slave trade, money because I'm white and he's not.
He owned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slaves.
I can see that.
No, actually.
My great-great-grandfather was a slave owner.
And I don't think that's uncommon from either side.
Oh. I don't know what to say. This is...
And Ainsley Harrington's a lovely fella as well. I really like him. So where's the... oh, there they are. That's what I'm looking for. So... who do you think you are? Her Jewish ancestry.
I had this whole family that were part of this bigger thing, fighting for better, so that someone like me can walk around the East End of London with freedom, not looking over my shoulder and having the stress that they went through.
Being in business is like being a gladiator. Think about it. Well, this is awkward. Alex Scott, one of the faces of the BBC's new diversity drive, was shocked to discover that her ancestor owned slaves. With some doubting her presenting ability, Scott was nevertheless chosen to replace Dan Walker as the host of the Football Focus show earlier this year. Apparently this annoyed gammons, a leftist slur for working class people, but critics claimed it was an example of politically correct BBC box ticking. Well, this isn't politically correct. During her appearance on Ancestry show Who Do You Think You Are, Scott began crying after discovering her Jamaican ancestor owned slaves in the 80s.
Obviously, this is our Jamaican ancestor who was obviously of African descent. So we've got African and potentially Muslims selling other African and Muslims into slavery in Africa. And we've got black and white slave owners in the West Indies and America who were actually slave owners.
1820s. Her 4 times great-grandfather, Robert Francis Coombs, who was black, owned 26 slaves. A historian on the show had to explain to Alex that it wasn't unusual for black people to own slaves.
Wasn't unusual for black people to own slaves in the West Indies.
In terms of explaining my emotion behind it, I suppose it goes against everything that I stand for, who I am, said Scott. I really did believe I'd be learning about my family as slaves, not the other side as the slave owners. Not shocking to learn that Scott is an ardent supporter of Black Lives Matter. Shame her great-grandfather didn't think so. But does this mean that Alex Scott is to blame or needs to apologise for the sins of her ancestors? Absolutely not. But neither does anyone else. How do you think the slaves were rounded up and sold in the first place? Not by white Europeans, but by black African tribal rulers. In 2009, the Civil Rights Congress of Nigeria even wrote to tribal chiefs saying, quote, "We cannot continue to blame the white men, as Africans, particularly the traditional rulers, are not blameless." Furthermore,
I think not blameless is the understatement. So the reparations movement would have to go back, because obviously when they're trying to compare this with the Jews, but when the Jews got reparations, they got reparations from the Germans because it was the Germans who inflicted the damage. If there's a reparations movement amongst the West Indian and African movement, some of them will actually be the slave owners of other Africans, and B, they would have to go back to whatever part of Africa they were enslaved from and then sue the African governments down there for reparations.
Actually, every major empire, ethnicity and civilization practiced slavery. People are still genuine.
But only Islam still to this day advocates it, hence why we've got sex slaves. We'll come on to that in a minute.
Dumb enough to think that only white people own slaves when everyone owns slaves. Go look at a list of where modern slavery still exists. You're not going to find many white countries on it. Under the Barbary slave trade, over 1 million white Europeans
So obviously we need to get reparations from the North Africans for the white slave trade.
Were enslaved by Middle Eastern and North African pirates. Muslims from Algeria, Tunisia and Morocco travelled as far north as Iceland to raid coastal towns and kidnap white slaves. Why isn't that being taught in schools? Why are only certain
obviously they were Muslims
and statues being torn down by the mob? Why is the modern debate around colonialism?
So why are we putting up mosques in Scotland if it advocates for sexual slavery and the raping of women and slavery, if we've got a problem with slavery?
Slavery and reparations habitually fixated around why only white people need to apologise for the sins of their ancestors. We know why. Because the only institutionalised form of racism that is still acceptable, and in fact encouraged
by the globalists,
the culture, in media, in schooling, in academia, from the government, is that directed towards white people. So yes, black people own slaves, Middle Easterners own slaves, Chinese people own slaves, everyone owns slaves, but kids grow...
So a great analysis there by PJW as well. If you've not gone that, Anything Goes by Paul Joseph Watson, fantastic fella. So again, as you can see here, we've got zero emissions here. We've got no chat, not one person saying. Now, usually people will come on and say hello, and I'll get some sort of chat there. You can see obviously that this is being stifled. So let's go back to Yasir Qadhi.
And the Arabs weren't going to like it if they took away their slaves. So for, it was necessary to propagate Islam for people to, for Arabs to keep their slaves. So Allah and Muhammad is appeasing the people around him. I mean, it's a good thing that he didn't take down the Kaaba that people are already worshiping in. That's not what I'm critiquing here. But saying that Muhammad does things for the PR of Islam is not a good defense.
In the global world that we live in, when there are large Muslim minorities like us in America and Australia and Canada, and something happening in Pakistan has global impact, can we rethink through in the nation state certain laws? Every alim says yes, because temporarily you can rethink. By the way, the science of applying Islam at a societal level, it is a separate branch of fiqh. It is called...
You see how quickly he jumped off of the topic to hide what he just said? And he's appealing to authority. Like, listen to this.
The science of applying says yes, because you rethink through in the nation state certain laws. Every alim says yes, because temporarily you can rethink. By the way, the science of applying Islam...
Temporarily we can rethink. By the way, the science of applying Islam... Did you catch that? He's going to talk about how the science of applying Islam's rules, whatever. He's going to talk about how that's a complicated topic and like we can't get into it. But he just said what he just said.
Because temporarily you can rethink.
So basically we'll gaslight the West until we can implement blasphemy laws in Western countries supported by the globalist shells.
Temporarily you can rethink. So... when people make up these conspiracy theories about Muslims are lying to you till they take over and this and that, and I always say no, like actual everyday Muslims don't know half of this stuff. Like I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that I think that the average Muslim in the street is a decent person, and I don't think they know to the extent what they've got different degrees of religiosity, and only the nutters know.
Most Muslims don't know. The problem is when they find out, they just brush it under the table because it's too big for them to think about, or no, this is not real Islam and so on. But here he is saying it. He's saying temporarily because of PR, because we look bad. And then it's a big, complicated issue whether we can apply the same laws all the time or not. And he's just deflecting from it.
The way,
like
if this was the act of God and a sane, rational person, why would you need to deflect from it? Why would you need to change it?
Caller, tell us what we need to know.
The science of applying Islam at a societal level, it is a separate branch of fiqh. It is called siyasa shar'iyya. It is called Islamic political science. The fact of the matter, most minor students of knowledge, they study a book of fiqh and they think this book is the constitution of the country. No, books of fiqh are personal between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't change those just because of a culture and society. Applying fiqh at a communal level, at a societal level, that is a separate branch of Islam. And unfortunately, many people don't study that branch. The top scholars do. That's why they all understand. Sometimes you can temporarily fine-tune. We're not saying abrogate. Nobody has the right to abrogate the Sharia.
No.
So this notion of blasphemy and of ridda, we
temporarily don't kill them.
Wait till we take over, and then we can implement blasphemy laws and kill them. That's what Hamza Useless has done with his hate speech bills.
Muslim land, and just take them to the judge, and they will temporarily, kill them.
Have the right in every society, Muslim majority, to say what can and cannot be done, and that is not a rejection of the Sharia. Sadly, what happens when I say this? You have the ultra zealots. A'udhu billah, he's a sellout. He's a liberal. He's appeasing.
You think this is what a liberal Muslim looks like?
I don't know what this is, mate. This is horrendous. This is they call people extremists and fundamentalists. This is a literalist. This is a guy who wants to literally interpret a doctrine that is 1400 years. It's not changed as if that's a good thing. Who wants to kill homosexuals, stone women to death, and wants to gaslight the West into believing that this is not real Islam, which is.
Guys, this is what a moderate Muslim looks like. Yeah, you get what a moderate Muslim preacher looks like. Most moderate Muslims don't know what this is about, but when they hear it, they have to defend it.
The kuffar, a'udhu billah.
The kuffar, that's like just saying the N-word to black people. I mean, that's just an insult, the word kuffar.
No, this is fiqh. As Sufyan al-Thawri said, Anybody can take the most difficult opinion and apply it. Fiqh is to know when to apply the concession. This is what Sufyan al-Thawri said. Anybody can find the most difficult and say, this is Islam. No, real Islam, which is real fiqh, when can we make the concession? So to conclude, I know it's an emotional topic, but wallahi, somebody has to say so that we feel that this is our religion. And if you disagree with me, come and speak with me directly and let's go back and forth. I conclude a number of points. First and foremost, it is a mistake of the highest magnitude to worry about fiqh when what happened is absolutely haram, regardless of which
It's
madhab
not haram. It's not haram. It's in the Quran. And all you're wanting to do is change the murder of somebody from the mob to the state. It's absolutely disgusting.
you follow. You do not allow vigilante justice and mob.
Oh, well, that's great. So we'll get the state to murder the person for blaspheming against your disgusting prophet.
Mentality. Secondly,
okay, I can't remember if he says it more explicitly than that, but I think this is a good segue. I'll show you how he's incorrect. Let's look at this hadith right here. So he said no vigilante justice, right? No mob mentality. I don't have an example for a mob, but I do have an example for vigilante justice. Here, let's take a look at it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So it says the book of prescribed punishments, Kitab al-Hudud, chapter, the ruling regarding one who reviles the Prophet, Hukm man sabba an-nabi. So calling the Prophet names and so on. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read it in English, of course. A blind man had a slave mother, as in a slave that gave him a child, who used to abuse the Prophet. Keep in mind the word abuse, right?
I think we've read this, but this is the same thing I had earlier on about...
if you killed someone, you had, there was retaliation. If you killed them for no good reason, not a justifiable reason, you have to die, or one life has to be lost in exchange for that, or you got to pay a sum of money. And the Prophet basically said, okay, this settles it. That's it. She's dead. That's it. So when Yasir Qadhi doesn't...
Now, that's a thing in the Arabic culture that's quite interesting. No, you shouldn't throw it all out with the baby with the bathwater. So what they do is that, say I killed somebody, I can actually physically pay money to the family of the individual I killed, and I wouldn't go to jail. But they would say, right, okay, I'll give you £1 million. I did kill the person. And then they would be relieved of the money, and it would be given to as compensation, basically. And the person wouldn't go to jail or have a reduced sentence, which is quite an interesting take on that as well.
Think of a hadith like this, or he doesn't even bring it up and say, by the way, this doesn't actually apply, so don't follow this. I mean, that will be the time. This is the video where he's talking about this specific case where someone takes justice into their own hands and he doesn't think to bring it up. Now, let's take a poll, guys in the comments and girls in the comments. Do you think it's because he is a small student, as he says, and he doesn't know enough about Islam? How can he not know about this?
He knows about it in his gaslighting, brother. That's
That's it is clear cut that the person intends to disrespect Allah and His Messenger and says something that is absolutely unambiguously clear. Our scholars say, Qurtubi and others, they mention, if the man says, a Christian says, God has a son, this might be blasphemous to us, but it is not blasphemy that will get him killed. That's his aqeedah.
Oh, well, that's okay. That's okay then. If it won't get me killed for saying the Jesus the Son of God, that's fine. I mean, I don't care about that as well as an atheist. But I know what they do. They want to kill atheists as well. I mean, these guys are a real piece of work.
If God has a son, then what do you expect a Christian to say? That's his belief. So what is he saying? What is the intention needs to be looked at? The court of law does that. Is he asking for forgiveness? Point number 3, in the Hanafi school, it's not even applicable upon non-Muslims.
You see the excuses that he's giving?
Yeah, for setting the guy on fire. I mean, it's just your religion does say it, mate, and it does say to kill by the mob. It doesn't matter whether it's a mob or the state. It's still disgusting. You've got a disgusting religion that advocates the murdering of people.
So he's saying, if it was in a different situation, but this has nothing to do with Islam because it's not it wasn't done in the court of law. And he's saying, and also in one of the interpretations, it's not allowed at all. What is the point of bringing up one of the interpretations? That's what I don't understand.
In the first place. Point number 4, we have to ask ourselves, where is this hatred coming from?
Islam.
Fact of the matter, we do have preachers and clerics who are fomenting this.
It's in the doctrines of Islam. It's not preachers. Preachers are maybe literalists and they're taking the literal interpretation out of what it says as a conquering international expansionist political ideology, as well as despotic political ideology, as well as religion.
Why? Because it makes people popular. Let's be honest here. People like me are not popular in many circles
because they're souls in the narrative.
Because I'm saying we don't do this. We unite together. We don't preach hatred. As much as we can, we bring our societies together. If you need to correct with wisdom. Correct ideas without preaching hatred. This is what I'm saying to people.
But if somebody blasphemes or says anything bad about religion, I think they should be killed. Come on. And I think what we'll do now is not kill MD till we take over in the West, and we'll gaslight the West, but we all know underlying that killing people for blasphemy is the way forward.
Unfortunately, not everybody's like this. And then the last point that it needs to be said, top-notch ulama, the cream of the crop, they're allowed to come together in every land and rethink through what can be applied at a national level that's separate than what is found in the books of fiqh. Sometimes you can lift for a while and sometimes you can apply for a while. In the end, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for hidayah and tawfiq.
Okay. Now we've had enough of you.
Yeah.
So
yes.
You see, he said a whole lot of nothing. He just said, this has nothing to do with us.
Nothing on the live chat.
Don't blame Islam. In Islam, you have to intend it. The guy didn't intend it. So that's number one. Also, according to one interpretation, one school of thought, he's not even culpable. He won't be killed. He'd just be jailed. And also, like there are certain conditions. Just come out and say it. Just say it. Leave it to us.
When we have our Sharia states, then we can apply Sharia law, but not now keep it on hold temporarily.
Leave it to the.
So what they're talking about, they've already got Islamic states. So what they're trying to say is when we impose Islam on Western countries through the open border. Situations that both the Scottish National Party, the Welsh National Party, the Lib Con Party and the Greens have done, and is allowing this to happen for us to be taken over through the use of mass immigration.
Leaders, maybe not you're not a judge, but leave it to the judge. Even though his last name is Qadhi, he's not a Qadhi. Well, now I want to show you
I don't know what Qadhi means. I know Khalifa is like a ruler, but I'm not sure what Qadhi is.
Right, the way that they say it was, this hadith is okay, the hadith that I showed you a minute ago, and I'm going to bring it up again on screen. So this is the hadith, Sunan Abu Dawood. It's talking about the time that someone killed his slave / mother of his children, because she was
what a nice guy, what a nice fella.
This prophet.
So he murdered his slave wife, just like Muhammad raping sexual slaves, raping them. But he, not only did he murder the woman, but he also murdered the child from him raping the woman. Oh, aye.
And the Prophet said, "Oh well, that's just it ends right here. Like that's it. The guy didn't get in trouble. He didn't even say, people in the future, do not do that. No, if anything, he's kind of endorsed it, hasn't he? Implicitly, he hasn't said there's anything wrong with it. So." Yeah, the Prophet did approve of her execution, and not only that, he pre-approved of the execution of people like that in the future, because nobody asked the permission of the Prophet.
But it's not only that, the Prophet is seen as the perfect man, so by doing this and by saying this, that he has advocated it basically to this day.
And the fact that we're even considering that as a defense, like, oh, they didn't ask his permission first. So what if they did ask his permission and he said yes? Would that have made it any better? In the minds of many Muslims and someone like Yasir Qadhi, yeah. So someone's saying Islamic scholars unanimously agree that vigilante justice is prohibited. Well, what does this hadith mean? Are all Islamic scholars blind to this hadith? Because the last time I brought it up, a lot of excuses were, well, we don't know if she could have harmed the Prophet in the future. Maybe that was it. So I'm just saying Islamic scholars need to look at their own texts and try to figure out where is it coming from. And
I would actually like to cover, but I don't take any more. I've taken a big chunk of this gentleman's video. So I posted Aladdin. Go and subscribe. I've subscribed, liked his video. Go and subscribe to Apostate Aladdin. Good guy. So, what about cousin marriage? Do you think Yasir Qadhi is a product of cousin marriage? This is another dynamite idea from Islam as well, where the Prophet said it's okay to have sex with your cousin. Now, there's obviously other other groups such as the Jews and the elite, the ruling class, that were all having sex with themselves till they get elongated features, like the Hanoverians started to become hideously deformed because they were sleeping with their cousins and their even their sisters. But I mean, cousin marriage is one genetic step off sleeping with your sister or your brother. It means you're only going to have 3 parents, and leading to consanguinity, which is, I think, a lowering of the IQ. Cousin marriage includes those between first cousins are permitted, but in fact it wasn't just permitted by Islamic law. It was actually Muhammad who said to his stepson or something that it's okay to have sex with your cousin. The scriptures, obviously it might have been smaller tribes at that point, and everybody been more closely related, but this was obviously 1400 years ago, and the scriptures were practiced by Muhammad himself as well as his companions. Muhammad's practice of cousin marriage is additional to cementing the legality of the practice, renders the practice of sunnah, or a good deed, good deed worthy of commendation, given Muhammad's status as al-Insan al-Kamal, lit, the perfect man. So the perfect man, by him instructing his stepson or his son or his cousin or something like that to have sex with his cousin, again, this is written down in the textures. Cousin marriage has been a common throughout the Islamic history and remains so in majority Muslim nations today, comprising a significant percentage of the total population of these nations. So what's actually happening in the UK? So in the BBC, stop doing that, that's very annoying. Bradford study finds higher birth rate defect risk in married cousins. And this is the 4th of July 2013. The number of babies born with birth defects in Bradford, obviously a significant Muslim town in England, is nearly double the national average. Research conducted in the city. So birth defects, mental retardation from actually having sex with your cousin. Don't forget that means you've only got 3 actual grandparents. The study found that this was largely in the Jewish community and the aristocracy in Europe, that this has continued to cause defects, and they outlawed this because of the increase in birth defects, and it makes you look, elongates your features, and it really started to make the people look very weird. The study found this was largely because marriages between first cousins in Pakistani communities, well, in the Muslim community, sanctioned in the Quran, as we just read, consanguinity marriages account for nearly a third of abnormalities in a study of more than 11,300 babies. So all of these babies are having problems.
All right, folks, this is Harris Sultan, the ex-Muslim
So let's talk about sex slavery in Islam.
atheist, and welcome to another episode of Sultan's House of Sin.
So Harris Sultan is an ex-Pakistani Muslim who's now an atheist and lives in, I think, in Australia.
Full Fizz K, I don't know who that is. All right, let's see. Full Fizz K.
Hello there.
Hello.
Yeah, just regarding, obviously, I see you bring it up a lot, the few times I do watch, what you say. Regarding the sex slaves in the Quran.
Right.
Or, the so-called verses, that you claim promote taking of sex slaves and whatnot.
Now, I read this independently. I read the Quran when I was in jail in Dubai. So I didn't get my knowledge from YouTube, but I've got some knowledge from YouTube as well. But I knew because I was given the Quran by a Muslim in jail in the UAE when I was being detained after being attacked by a Pakistani taxi driver. Which, when you actually read it, you find that if you are a non-Muslim that is attacked by a Muslim, they're going to take the word of the Muslim. So it's not a justice system. It's a bit like social justice. It's not actually a justice system.
I mean, could you give me your just briefly your arguments as to why you think that this actually promotes taking sex slaves?
Well, I just think that the biggest argument is that we have to have sex slaves, or if Prophet Muhammad or this.
So in the Quran and the Hadith it says that Muhammad was a sexual slave trader, a enslaver. Hence why it was okay for ISIS and everybody else. Come on to that in a minute. It was okay for the East African slave trade, the white slave trade, and maybe even the part of the transatlantic slave trade.
Book or this religion is for all times and all purposes. This is a horrible book of morality because sex slavery would never be okay. Especially in our day and age, in this day and age, it would never be.
Well, let me make a claim, Haris. Yeah, let me make a claim to you, and let me see if you agree with it or not. My claim is this: first of all, I don't think the Quran promotes that. Let me just make that clear. But my claim is this:
But it allows it, but does it allow it?
Let me make my claim, and then we'll come back to this. My claim to you is: wherever a war is going on, whether it's in Kashmir, where we know Hindu soldiers, they rape Muslim women. Whether it's Muslims doing it, wherever wars go on, whether it was in Bosnia, Chechnya, Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere else, even Syria, I'm not saying Muslims don't do it. Wherever wars go on, rapes take place. Soldiers rape women. Yes or no? Do you agree with this claim?
No, there are no reported rapes of or massive raping of United States in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Well, you've just got to do a simple Google search, my friend. That's all you've got to do.
Not in that, and those people who get caught, they actually have been court-martialed. The strong laws against.
No. The people who committed those heinous crimes in Guantanamo Bay and they were caught out because and the soldier that released them images was actually disciplined.
Are you talking about Abu Ghraib prison? Are you talking about Abu Ghraib prison?
No, you're talking. You made the claim that the U.S. doesn't commit these crimes.
Yeah.
I'm countering that. I'm saying they do. I mean, Abu Ghraib is an example. Guantanamo Bay is an example. I mean, these are just a few examples I can give you.
You're giving me a vague example of isolated incidents that they've been caught out and they've been dealt with. Those people have been punished. There's an official policy. We don't do that. So to say that it happens, therefore, let's just put it in a holy book. So, we know that it happens. We know that when at the end of Second World War, there were more rapes committed by Red Army on German women than ever in history. And then, yes, there were some rapes committed by American forces too, but they were almost negligible at that point compared to what else. So we know that these things happen. But you know what we do? We don't say that, well, these things happen. So, yeah. We say, no, we got to make laws against it.
Okay, Haris, listen.
Murder. Hang on, murders happen, but we don't say, oh, it happened. So you know what? Just ignore it. We make laws against it.
Okay. I understand. Now, so is that a yes then? You accept my claim that it happens?
What?
That rapes do happen.
Yeah, of course rapes happen. Murders happen.
Okay. Thank you. So we're on the same boat. I'm glad to see that you're at least rational. And you're not.
I know. Let's just decide where this rationality leads us.
Right. Okay. Well, my second claim is obviously I told you at the beginning I don't believe the Quran promotes this. All the verses that you can quote me, and I can go through them with you right now, but I don't know whether you have time, and I don't have a lot of time as well. I've got to go in a few minutes.
Hey, that's fortuitous.
But all the
well, I'm only 4 minutes into. I don't know if this guy's talking for the next 20, 15 minutes.
Verses that you talk about, it regulates this act because we believe in the Creator. We know, Allah created us. He knows His own creation. He knows that men are animalistic. like I said, you've agreed with me that rapes do occur. All the verses in the Quran that, mind you, were revealed 1400 years ago when, taking slaves and all this sort of stuff and rapes and that, there was no human rights. This was the norm.
Time out. So you agree with this time out, just for that time? Would you agree? Now, let me ask you a question. Would you agree we've created a better society today than we had 1400 years ago?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that, I believe that Islam has an inbuilt flexibility. I believe it does go in certain things. It does, follow the times. I mean.
Right, that's enough. If you haven't subscribed, Harris Sultan, another great guy.
Her home and sold into sexual slavery.
So I don't know. I like this girl as well. I don't know. Can, I think her name's Can, but I don't know what her first name is. She speaks very well. What does that tell his name? Oh, Can and Sultan.
Out their event with former Islamic State.
So this is in Justin Trudeau's Canada.
There's this school in Toronto, and basically they pulled out their event with former Islamic State sex slave over fears it would foster Islamophobia.
So a woman who was taken by Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, who was taken, maybe a Yazidi, is taken as a sex slave, raped, is not allowed to speak in a school where, with a religious ideology that advocates the raping of non-Muslims and taking them as sex slaves. She's not allowed to speak in Trudeau's Canada for sparking a fake word called Islamophobia on a religion that advocates the raping of women and children. And that's Trudeau's Canada. I think we've got a lot to worry about.
Yeah. Event with Nobel Peace Prize laureate and UN Goodwill Ambassador Nadia Murad was cancelled by a Canadian school. So this lady, an ISIS sex slave survivor, literally got cancelled. Can you imagine? A Canadian school has been forced to apologize after a book club event with Nadia Murad, a Nobel Prize winner and former Islamic State sex slave, was cancelled over fears it would foster Islamophobia. Helen Fisher, the superintendent at the Toronto District School Board, voiced her concerns over Ms. Murad's The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State, and said that her students would not participate in a sit-down event with the author scheduled for February. The move drew wide criticism, and the board has been forced to clarify that these views are not its official position and that it will be reviewing the books. Ms. Murad's frightening story details
this drew wide criticism, and the board had been forced to clarify that these views... What views? Let's see that again. A Canadian school had been forced to apologise, not to the girl, but to the child rapist death cult. All right, I see. Or members of it, who in turn had raped and made a sex slave of this girl. All right, that's what that just shows you what the type of scumbag Trudeau is. Has been forced to apologise after a book club event with Nadine Murad, a Nobel Prize winner and former Islamic State sex slave, which we've just proven that the Islam promotes sexual slavery, so this is completely Islamic, was cancelled over fears of fostering a problem with the child rapist death cult. All right, and obviously women are seen to be mature when they have puberty or when they get a period, which is can be as young as 9, so it's okay to have sex slaves as young as 9. Helen Fisher, the superintendent at the Toronto District School Board, voiced her concerns not over the Islamic community that advocates raping and taking sex slaves, but over the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Miss Murad, who was an actual sex slave under an Islamic caliphate. Jesus. Oh, and but we'll shout this fake made-up word, Islamophobia, an irrational fear of becoming a sex slave and being sold amongst different men. This woman looks quite old. I've seen photographs of children being taken in as sex slaves. All right. And my story of captivity and my fight against Islamic State, and said her students would not participate in sit-down events with the author scheduled for February. Oh.
The move drew wide criticism, and the board has been forced to clarify that these views are not its official.
The views of me being a sex slave is not the official doctrine of my school. The fact that this Nobel Prize winner is being raped and sold into sex slavery, which is in the Quran, is not apparently under Turdo's education system.
Official position, and that it will be reviewing the books. Miss Murad's frightening story.
All right. So it's the books, it's not the Quran that advocates sex slavery that's the problem. It's the books that this young lady is, who was the sex slave, is the problem. All right. Right. Oh, upside down world in Turdo's world. The bastard child, allegedly, of Castro.
Story details her family being executed and how she was snatched from her home and sold into sexual slavery. She was raped, tortured, and exchanged among militants in northern Iraq before escaping. She's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, UN Goodwill Ambassador, and a leading advocate for survivors of genocide and sexual violence.
Genocide of Islam and sexual slavery. Oh, fantastic. But you can't say anything because that's an irrational fear of the child rapist death cult.
Fisher's claims Tanya Lee, a Toronto mother and entrepreneur who runs the book club for teenage girls called A Room of Your Own, said she sent an email back with information about Islamic State from the BBC and CNN, according to the Globe and Mail. This is what Islamic State means, Miss Lee wrote to the superintendent. It is a terrorist organization. It has nothing.
It is a literal interpretation of what Muhammad advocated 1400 years ago. That's what it is.
To do with ordinary Muslims.
Yeah, that is vaguely true, but it's just like saying not all Nazis gassed the Jews, but all Nazis were Nazis.
Muslims. The Toronto District School Board should...
All right, I see. So, but it still advocates that. So the Muslims still follow the books that advocate sexual slavery and killing other people, as we've just seen.
Be aware of the difference. The next day, Miss Lee said that Miss Fisher sent her a copy of the board's policy on selecting equitable, culturally relevant and responsive reading material.
The rape of women and sex slavery in Islam is not culturally sensitive. Well, why do you have to be culturally sensitive? They're advocating the killing of people, so why would you have to be culturally sensitive to them when you're advocating violence?
So anyway...
And raping women. Don't see the feminists coming out in this one, do you? They're all stum.
They did a review and they said...
I get it to the two. I mean, obviously feminism is a far left ideology as well. It's a supremacist movement. So obviously they see some sort of kindred spirit and, I don't know, not advocating for being raped by Muslims. I don't know. Somebody will need to explain it, why feminists don't come out and complain about Islam.
Said that the Equity Department does not review and approve books for book clubs, so it was nothing to do with them. They also cancelled this defense lawyer as well because she acted for broadcaster, this guy, Gian Gomeshi, I don't know who he is, but who was acquitted basically on sexual assault charges. So they are cancelling other people besides her, just in all fairness. But
so
yeah,
the guy who, the lawyer that defended this person who was acquitted of sexual whatever, and the person who was raped by multiple men and sold by multiple men under Islamic law.
They're saying, we sincerely apologize to both Miss Hinain and Miss Murad, both of whom have powerful stories to tell and from whom we believe students would learn a great deal. Anyway, look at this.
Look at this. This is an actual footage. I'm not going to play the video because...
okay. Hold on. Let me stop sharing my screen. Let's see what you have.
No, that's fine. No.
Okay.
People can see it. This is an actual footage. I'll include I'll tweet the link so you can actually watch. It's horrendous. I'm not going to play the video here, but this is how they were sold like animals. Pretty much how Muhammad used to sell. There are Islamic books written in great detail how they used
It's a literal interpretation of what Muhammad did 1400 years ago.
To be slave markets, and people will come and inspect their breasts and everything. And this is what was happening here. And this guy was actually in the middle of beating up this poor woman. So this Nadia Murad girl would have lived through it, and she's the one who's getting cancelled. So carry on.
Yeah, so basically the school board withdrawing their support means that they are not putting their students first, only their administration. Nadia Murad is a Nobel Peace Prize winning author and human rights activist. We have so much to learn from her, yes we do, about the triumph of the human spirit and the will and the ability to help others overcome tragedy. Nadia and her activism is an example to us all in societies all around the world. Thousands of Yazidis were killed or enslaved when the Islamic State group overran northern Iraq in 2014. The extremists, also known as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant or ISIL, considered the religious minority to be pagans or even devil worshippers and deemed the men could be killed and the women and girls forced into servitude or sexual slavery. Oh my God, Haris, this is literally the hadiths coming to life, by the way. When the militants swept into Yazidi towns around Mount Sinjar in northwest Iraq, more than 6,400 women and children from the Yazidi minority were estimated to have been enslaved and often forced to marry fighters. So
forced marriage as well. Oh, that's great, isn't it? Oh, that's great. So there's a whole bunch of things. So what have I put? ISIS, sex, slavery, Sultan Harris. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do your own research on there as well. So Julian Assange has been extradited because he was on top of what was happening in the Globalist and the Telegraph, Gareth Davis. Julian Assange can be extradited to the US as High Court overturns previous decision. Disgusting. He might get ended in there just like McAfee, and obviously the Globalists are closing ranks. McAfee and in Spain and Epstein. Julian Assange, and obviously quite interesting that they've not brought out any information on Ghislaine Maxwell, Maxwell, whose case has been shrouded in mystery. If you can get tweets of people who are in the court case, that's the only way you're going to find out the information. Julian Assange can be extradited to the US. The High Court has ruled as the senior judge overturns an earlier decision in the case of WikiLeaks founder. And here's protests.
How anyone would believe anything out of the diplomatic mouths of the US after they spied and invaded the privacy and stole the property of Julian Assange is beyond belief. The case is booted back down to the Westminster Magistrates Court for them to reconsider. Since the US won it, they decided again, and then on to Priti Patel.
There is no case against Julian Assange. He should be a free man. Then we will have
diplomatic assurances. How ridiculous is that? They went through.
Who masterminded Julian's kidnap from the embassy 2.5 years ago. Burnett is a 40-year-old, for 40 years he's been a friend of Alan Duncan's. It really is outrageous what is happening behind us in this court. It's just an absolute sham.
All of the Western liberal democracies. This is
to suppress the free press. The free press is the basis of democracy.
That's right. And the free press is being compromised just now. This is in the... What's this in? So this is in the Daily Mail. Free Julian Assange. People gather to protest against court verdict. When was this? Julian Assange, free court. I think that was just a wee short one from the Daily Mail. Okay, what else then? Boris Johnson has effed it up. Effed it. Tory MPs say their leader has lost the dressing room. Boris Johnson is likely to receive a glass of champagne to mark the 2-year anniversary of his decisive general election victory tomorrow. It is not just that he once again has a newborn baby to look after. It is because this week has been a vivid reminder of the two factors that repeatedly stop him from delivering on many of the promises made ahead of the election: the ravage of the pandemic and unforced errors in number 10, which some in Westminster believe that now brought Prime Minister close to his end game. So we could be seeing a stalking horse. Obviously, Rishi Sunak, the Bilderbergers guy in here, has, as I already pointed out from the Daily Express, Rishi Sunak urged to act as EU to unleash banking revolution. Future the City chairman of City United Project think tank, Professor Daniel Hodgson, has criticised the snail rate process towards launching a sterling-wide central digital currency. Don't worry, it's coming. I'll have a wee look at that later.
Joe Biden, who, as you know, is the acting president of...
So Dave Rubin, I'm waiting to get on. Dave, hurry up.
The United States. This is a man who gives speeches every now and again, and then accidentally, when he goes off teleprompter, always says that he's going to get in trouble when he starts telling you the truth, or he loses his train of thought, or fumbles and mumbles, or runs away from questions, or they hide him, or all this stuff. Nonetheless, the guy is supposedly the president. Now it is coming out that basically the administration is coordinating with mainstream media because they don't like some of the coverage they're getting. Now, before I read you the...
And this is the complicity between, and it's happening in the UK, so it's not just in America, the complicity between the media and anybody challenging the political class has to be smeared like I was.
The quotes from the Daily Wire really think about how crazy this is. We had 4 years of the Orange Man being president, where every single story was about racism and xenophobia, and this is Hitler, and democracy is over and everything. There's basically, in the mainstream, there's really no criticism of Biden. You know, like, sure, we're having supply chain problems, inflation is a disaster in Afghanistan, like the list goes on, but there's really no criticism, real criticism of Biden. They either blame it on Trump, or it's not, you know, Biden's doing the best.
I don't think he's even holding press conferences
he can.
Where he has to answer any questions. He's almost become like a dictator.
He's 2 days worth of gas. You know, the guy's trying. He's released 2 days worth of gas. That's funny. Anyway, the administration basically is coordinating now with mainstream media on how they should cover them. We've got some info here from the Daily Wire. CNN reported the White House not happy with news media's coverage of the supply chain and economy, has been working behind the scenes trying to reshape coverage in its favor. Senior White House and administration officials, including NEC Deputy Directors David Kamen and Bharat Ramuti, along with envoy John Porsari, have been briefing major newsrooms over the past week, a source tells me. The officials have been discussing with newsroom trends pertaining to job creation, economic growth, supply chains, and...
I mean, they've got, I think the inflation rate's something like 7% just now.
More. The basic argument that has been made...
When you compare it to under Trump's America, where the lowest unemployment for women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, it was unbelievable, the growth rate 4%, seeing the disaster that is under Biden. I wonder if how much buyer's remorse there are.
That the country's economy is in much better shape than it was last year. I'm told the conversations have been productive, with anchors and reporters and producers getting to talk.
So yeah, so we've got the closed shop of the media. I think six media moguls own all the TV and radio and television, the majority of the television series, whether they're local or national. About 6 or 7 or something like that, moguls that own all the TV, so it's not very difficult to control.
With the officials. Biden's approval rating is so low that he has had a lower approval rating than every governor in the U.S., and his approval rating has dipped to as low as 18% in one state. So for
I'll leave that the rest of it. You subscribe to Dave Rubin, he's a good guy. So I think that's us. So back to the curious Sahar. So by 1651, Johnson gained his freedom and acquired land and servants, slaves I think they were, attaining legal ownership for life over a black man named John Carson, a condition that separated servitude labour for time from slavery labour for life. In 2010, Glenn Beck asserted that this case revealed how Johnston owned the first state-sponsored slave in American history, and like-minded commentators unsurprisingly agreed. In the same episode, Beck insisted that Johnston's story proves that slavery is a human problem. It's not a white condition. Well, we already know that is, or a black condition. It is a Muslim condition because it's intrinsic to Islam. As the narrative goes, if the black man also owned enslaved people in Africa, as they said, it was only the black man and other Muslims. I don't think there was any documented details of invasions to capture Africans in Africa by Europeans, and that's including the Portuguese and the Spanish. As far as I'm aware, all of it was traded by the rulers, so they were traded for by goods and services, and the slaves were purchased. And not only that, in Africa, the slaves predated slavery predated the transatlantic slave trade, which was between two periods, and also the British stopped all slavery, including African, Arabic, and other slavery, and the Portuguese and the Spanish slavery as well. So yeah, quite interesting that as well. So I think that's it. So absolutely nobody talking. No, not one comment, which means that this has been suppressed. Concurrent viewers, 0. So this is very, very strange. Anyway, love my baby gorillas.